Chapter 1. The autumn night was cold, and the house in the dilapidated mountain village was leaky. Under the thin blanket, Ziyue woke up with a start. He had transmigrated. Even though 3 days had passed, he still found it hard to believe. In the past 3 days, he had gained some understanding of this world and knew that this was not any world he knew of. According to the elders in the village, there were people, ghosts, demons, and immortals here, of course. He did not believe it. However, the cause of his predecessor's death gave him goosebumps. Did he encounter a ghost? How could this be? Ziyue sneered. This must be some confusion from the memory absorption. He nodded affirmatively again. Children would always have some strange thoughts. His predecessor was only 8 years old and had heard a lot of nonsense from the elders in the village. It was very normal for him to dream about what he thought about during the day. Whoosh! The wind became stronger, accompanied by a bone-chilling chill. However, this chill was especially gloomy. So cold, Ziyue shuddered violently. Suddenly, he seemed to sense something and slowly turned his head. In the small room, there was no decoration except for a small wooden table. There was only a wooden window, which was half open. Through the wooden window, Ziyue was shocked. A 7- or 8-year-old child was lying outside the window with a pale face, staring at him with empty eyes. Suddenly, the child grinned and waved as if to say, "Come and play with me." Ziyue had goosebumps all over his body. There really is a ghost. He was stunned. An indescribable feeling hit him, making his mind go blank. Ghost? This is a ghost? Did I really encounter a ghost? What should I do? He panicked and did not dare to move. Perhaps seeing that Ziyue did not respond for a long time, the little ghost was a little impatient and went directly through the window. In an instant, the originally gloomy and cold room became even more piercing. In Ziyue's eyes, the bright moonlight seemed eerie and terrifying. He tried to suppress the fear in his heart, but looking at the little ghost that went through the wall and floated closer, that kind of fear was instinctive and uncontrollable. Cluck, 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 his teeth chattered. He wanted to roar and expel this feeling of powerlessness, but he found that he couldn't move at all. He could only watch as the little ghost approached. His face was deathly pale, his eyes were empty, his lips were purplish black, and when he opened his mouth, his brown teeth seemed to be oozing with blood. "How dare you!" Just then, a thunderous roar exploded outside the door. Then, the door suddenly opened. A burly man with his sleeves rolled up strode out and threw a punch. A strong aura of chi and blood spread out. Ah! With a sharp and mournful cry, the little ghost's body was torn apart like a rag and scattered like smoke. The originally gloomy room seemed to have melted, and the world seemed to have brightened up. Kung Fu. Ziyue's pale face relaxed, and his eyes lit up. Killing a little ghost with a single punch, if this wasn't Kung Fu, then what was? Are you all right? Mother was scared to death. Soon, a beautiful woman walked in from outside the door. She threw herself at Ziyue and hugged him. Behind the woman, a tall and thin man also looked nervous, but he didn't say anything. These two people were Ziyue's parents, Bai Yong and He Honghua. "Father, mother, I'm fine." Ziyue's heart warmed. He replied, but his eyes were fixed on the burly man. His heart was burning. Kung Fu. Could he kill ghosts? What happened this time was actually a huge blow to him. It made him completely understand that this world was really different. Don't worry, it's just a little ghost. As long as you have enough courage, it can't do anything to you. The burly man saw Ziyue looking at him and thought that he was still a little scared. He smiled comfortingly. "This is your Uncle Ming. He's a servant in Qinghe Town. He's very impressive. You little rascal, you didn't even tell us that you met a ghost." This time, if it wasn't for the knowledgeable Aunt Lu next door who saw your expression and mentioned it, your father would have been worried and asked Uncle Ming to come back. You would have been harmed by that ghost. Tianghua nagged. She was so angry that she slapped him a few times on the back. She was afraid that she would really hurt him, so she quickly reduced her strength. "Thank you, Uncle Ming." Ziyue broke free from his mother's embrace. He looked at the burly man and asked curiously, "Was what you used just now martial arts? Could you kill ghosts?" Su Ming looked at Ziyue in surprise. A 7 or 8-year-old child would have been scared to tears after such an incident. Those who were better would be silent. It was rare to see someone like Ziyue who thanked him politely and asked him a question calmly. It's just some moves. It's not really martial arts. As for killing ghosts, these little ghosts are actually very weak. They don't even dare to get close to people with strong qi and blood. I just condense my qi and blood on my fist so naturally I could directly disperse them. Su Ming smiled. He was quite pleased with himself. Little ghosts naturally wouldn't dare to get close to people with strong qi and blood. However, to disperse a little ghost soul with one punch wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Then I want to practice martial arts. Can I? Ziyue quickly followed up. Baiyang's expression changed, but he didn't say anything. Practice martial arts? It's a very difficult thing. It's not something an ordinary person can bear. Su Ming glanced at Ziyue. Although his body was weak, he did have a kind of spirituality that was hard to come by in a village child. It was very rare. No matter how difficult it is, it's better than being like this. I can't do anything against little ghosts. Ziyue's small face was full of seriousness. Martial arts can't be taught easily. Although I'm the head of the Qingatown Pier from the Scorching Sun Gang, I don't dare to teach martial arts to outsiders. However, I can recommend you to join the Scorching Sun Gang as an apprentice in a few businesses in Qingatown. You'll also have the opportunity to learn martial arts. After a pause, Su Ming continued, Of course, this isn't a small matter for you. You could discuss it first, then contact me. Saying this, Su Ming smiled and turned to leave. It was already very late. He was also from the Cloud Leaf Village and had a residence here. Naturally, he didn't want to stay any longer. Do you really want to learn martial arts? After a long silence, Baiyang asked. He Honghua was reluctant and wanted to refuse. However, when she thought of her son's encounter with ghosts, she could only sigh helplessly. Yes, Ziyue said firmly. He had been reborn. Who would want to die? If he didn't know what kind of world this was, it would be fine. Now that he knew that there were demons and ghosts here, and that there were countless strong people, he naturally felt uneasy. A little ghost could harm people's lives, let alone other existences. If he didn't have the ability, how could he survive? He didn't want to feel the helplessness he felt when encountering little ghosts, because he could really die. Moreover, it was very scary. Is you asleep? In another room, Baiyang asked. He's already asleep. He Honghua answered. She couldn't help but ask. You wants to learn martial arts. What are you thinking? I heard that the town isn't safe. Many of the villagers who went to work these years didn't come back. Moreover, I heard that the Scorching Sun Gang isn't a safe place either. Su Ming's uncle's third son went in and was beaten to death by the people there. In the eyes of those people, human life is very cheap. Of course I know, but what can we do? 2 years ago, Lotus Village, which is 7 li away from us, was completely wiped out. 5 years ago, the Hunter Village in the mountains, except for one lucky survivor, all died. Almost every few years, a disaster will come. Who knows if it's a bandit or something else? In the town, at least the government is guarding, and the Scorching Sun Gang is also strong, so it's safer. Our Cloud Leaf Village doesn't have strong people guarding it. What if we encounter a disaster? This is the way of the world. What can we do? You might be able to make a living in the town. Baiyang usually didn't speak much, but he understood very well. The strongest person in Cloud Leaf Village was Su Ming, but because he worked in the Scorching Sun Gang, he rarely came back. If he really encountered bandits or other disasters, the whole village of more than 100 people would be wiped out. This time, Ziyue encountered a ghost. He couldn't find anyone in the village who dared to help him, so he hurriedly traveled dozens of li to ask Su Ming for help. This was just a small ghost. It was said that it was the weakest evil. This time, Ziyue was stimulated to learn martial arts. Su Ming didn't refuse and agreed to recommend him. Although he was a little reluctant, he felt that this might be a good thing. After all, ever since the matter of Su Ming's uncle's third son became known, he hadn't recommended anyone to the Scorching Sun Gang for several years. On the other side, Ziyue naturally didn't really fall asleep. No matter how big his heart was, it was impossible for him to sleep peacefully after encountering such a supernatural event. After dealing with his mother, he opened his eyes. Even a wooden wall couldn't block out the sound, so even the conversation between his parents was transmitted into his ears. This world is indeed full of dangers. A small ghost can take a life, and there are also bandits running rampant. The matters of Lotus Village and Hunter Village are probably not that simple. Only by learning martial arts and becoming stronger can I protect myself and my family. Ziyue wasn't a real child. His mind was clear, and he understood his situation. In the past 3 days, he had already learned that his parents were just ordinary villagers. His father relied on farming and growing vegetables, and occasionally went to the nearby Tian family castle to help out. His mother sewed and mended shoes at home, and then sold them for a few coins in town. It could be said that they were as poor as a church mouse. Long before this, he had thought of changing and even made a few plans. But now that he knew that this world wasn't as simple as he thought, his plans naturally had to change. Fortunately, I'm not completely without support. By Ziyue thought to himself as a thought crossed his mind. With a thought, a transparent panel appeared in front of him. Name, Ziyue Strength, 0, 25, plus Speed, 0, 32, plus Physique, 0, 35, plus Martial Arts, None Soul Energy, 15. Although he wasn't clear, how did this panel integrate into his body? What was this thing? What special effects did it have? But at least he understood one thing very clearly. That was, with this status panel, it should be enough to let him have more advantages than others in this strange world of clouds and waves. It could even let him settle down and live a life and sort of the sky in one go. New book set sail. Hope that more new and old readers will collect, recommend, and support. Chapter 2. But what is this spirit energy? Also, what does the plus sign behind strength, speed, and vitality mean? Ziyue suddenly froze and was a little surprised. Long ago, he had discovered that he had obtained this strange attribute panel. He could roughly determine that this data was a representation of an adult's data. With an adult's strength, speed, and vitality of 1, the data that appeared in Ziyue's current 8-year-old appearance was naturally only a few tenths. However, what appeared in front of him back then was just a single piece of data. There was no so-called plus sign or spirit energy that appeared at the end. It was obvious that these were all new. Could it be because of that little ghost? After the little ghost died and its soul scattered, it was absorbed by this attribute panel and turned into spirit energy? Ziyue was suspicious and had some faint guesses. Subconsciously, Ziyue's consciousness was immersed behind the plus sign for strength. Suddenly, his body slightly heated up, as if he had gone through some training. Then, he looked at his body's data again. Name, Ziyue Strength, 0, 26, plus Speed, 0, 32, plus Vitality, 0, 35, plus Martial Arts, None Spirit Energy, 14, Strength increased by 0. 1, spirit energy decreased by 1. That is to say, by consuming a bit of spirit energy, I can increase my strength, speed, and vitality by 1. By Ziyue quickly determined this point. He used 2 more points of soul power to increase his speed and vitality. Immediately, the data on his body became strength, 0, 26, plus speed, 0, 33, plus vitality, 0, 36, plus martial arts, none spirit energy, 12. Although this increase was not big, Ziyue could feel that he was a little stronger than before. It's a pity that my spirit energy is too little. Moreover, the only way I know of to obtain spirit energy is to kill ghosts. With my strength, don't mention killing ghosts. If I really encounter ghosts, I'll definitely die. Is there any other way to obtain spirit energy? Ziyue's thoughts turned, and he temporarily gave up on using spirit energy to increase his strength. The next day, the sky cleared up. Ziyue got up early and washed up with a willow branch. He then led a thin and weak old cow to the grassland not far from the village to graze the cow. The old bull did not belong to the Bai clan. It was bought by the 6 neighboring clans. A few families took turns to raise them. and today it was by Ziyue's family's turn. At this time, there was already a child who was 1 or 2 years older than Ziyue. He was leading a cow and eating grass. When he saw him, he said excitedly, "I heard that you met a ghost. Is that true?" News spread quickly in the small village. Early in the morning, almost everyone had heard about his encounter with a ghost. Along the way, he had already met several people who asked him the same question. Their questions were not necessarily out of concern. Instead, it was more like they were satisfying their own curiosity. No one cared about his feelings. Once he answered, he would instead look like a ghost. What actions did he take? Was it scary? He would be bombarded with questions. Therefore, Ziyue ignored them. He tied the old cow to a big tree. The surrounding grass was enough for it to eat its fill. Only then did he climb up the tree and lay down gently. 2 hours later, Bai Ziyue led Old Cow all the way back home. At this time, his mother, He Honghua, was catching a chicken. Although He Honghua looked thin and weak, she was very nimble when it came to catching chickens. In just a few moves, she had already grabbed the old hen's neck. "Mother, why are you catching a chicken when it's not a festival?" Ziyue quickly put the cow in the cow pen and asked. This old hen laid eggs almost every day. In He Honghua's eyes, it was very precious. "Yesterday, your Uncle Ming helped you a lot. Although we can't take out a lot of money, we still need to treat him to a meal. This old hen is very fat. It's just right," He Honghua said. She crossed the old hen's 2 wings and directly made it unable to move. Then, she pulled out the feathers on its neck and was about to take action with a knife. Seeing this, Ziyue quickly went forward and said, "Let me help you." He grabbed the old hen's wings with one hand and lifted its neck with the other. Although He Honghua felt it was strange, she still smiled. She raised the kitchen knife, and with a slash, the hen cried out. Chicken blood spilled out and was scooped up by He Honghua, who was already prepared. Half a bowl of chicken blood flowed out. The old hen gradually lost its strength and died quickly. Seeing this, Ziyue quickly opened the status panel. Immediately, his status appeared in front of him. Name, Ziyue strength, 0, 26 plus, speed, 0, 33 plus, physique, 0, 36 plus, martial arts, non-spiritual energy, 13-inch spiritual energy increased by 1 point. As expected, when other creatures die, I can also obtain spiritual energy. Ziyue was slightly excited. Yesterday, he had already determined that spiritual energy was the guarantee for him to strengthen himself. But if he could only obtain spiritual energy by killing ghosts, then his improvement would be far away. After all, ghosts were rare and very dangerous. They were not something he could deal with. Therefore, he thought about whether the death of other creatures could also increase his spiritual energy. Previously, when he was herding cows, he did not crush ants and insects to experiment, but he did not gain anything. Now that he obtained some spiritual energy from killing a chicken, he could finally breathe a sigh of relief. With this, he finally found an effective way to improve his spiritual energy. At noon, Su Ming arrived as promised. He Honghua had been busy the whole morning preparing 7 to 8 dishes. They filled the table and were even more lavish than the New Year at home. "Sister-in-law, you're too kind," Su Ming said, and sat down under Bai Yong's greeting. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Bai Yong said nervously, "About my year, please take care of him in the future, Brother Su Ming. Don't worry, I can't guarantee that what happened to Qi will not happen to Mount Ziyue again," Su Ming said loudly after drinking a jar of wine. His face was slightly red. Then, "Thank you, Brother Su Ming." Hearing this, Bai Yong also breathed a sigh of relief. Qi was Su Ming's uncle's 3rd son. It was rumored that he was beaten to death when he was an apprentice. Now that he had Su Ming's assurance, he felt more confident. Ziyue originally thought that even if Uncle Ming agreed to bring him to town, he would have to wait for a few days. He did not expect to be called on the same day, and followed Su Ming to the entrance of the village. He did not have many things on him. He only had 2 changes of coarse linen clothes and the 3 silver coins that Honghua had placed in them before he left. They were folded together into a cloth bag and carried on his back. 3 silver coins, taking 1,000 copper coins as the norm was 1 tael. 1 tael was equivalent to 10 copper coins, so 3 silver coins were equivalent to 300 copper coins. After conversion, it was equivalent to 300 copper coins in Ziyue's previous life. It was not much, but when he thought about how Honghua had spent 2 months and almost 100 sols in exchange for these 3 silver coins, he felt very heavy. Chapter 3. Apart from Ziyue, there were 2 other children of the same age who followed Su Ming to town. One was called Su Li, and the other was called Zhangwei. Su Li was the child of Su Ming's cousin. He was fair and clean, but looked weak. As for Zhangwei, he was the strongest of the 3. His face was dark, and although he was young, he was muscular. Ziyue estimated that his strength and physique were above 0.5, much stronger than him. Zhangwei's parents died early, and he was now in the care of his uncle. His uncle and aunt were not harsh to him, but he was not their biological child. Furthermore, their family was poor, so they treated him differently. When they heard that Su Ming was recommending someone to be an apprentice, they sent him over. The journey from the village to Qinghe town was a full 50 miles. Most of it was mountain roads and small roads, so it was not easy to walk. Along the way, Ziyue gritted his teeth and persevered. He did not take the initiative to complain that he was tired. If he could not hold on any longer, he would use his spiritual energy to add points to his physique. While strengthening his physique, he would also be able to generate new energy, so he would not be too tired. Thus, even though Ziyue's physique was the weakest among the 3, the one who would complain of being tired was Su Li. Su Ming naturally took care of his nephew, so he would take the opportunity to call for a break. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Bai Ziyue hurriedly asked Su Ming about some matters related to martial arts. This was also his biggest motivation for going to Qinghe town. Martial arts are divided into external forging and internal forging. This is the so-called external forging of the muscles, bones, and skin, and internal forging of the 5 viscera and 6 bowels. After that, it is the inner chi realm. Once the inner chi is formed, one's strength will explode. Just like the brats you encountered before, as long as an inner chi expert's aura explodes, they will be crushed. Su Ming's face was solemn as he spoke seriously. Then Uncle Ming, what realm are you in? Su Li's eyes lit up as he asked curiously. Me? It can be considered internal forging. Su Ming's face revealed a trace of smile. External forging was a threshold. It was not that easy to go from external forging to internal forging. Even though it was only the beginning stages of internal refinement, his status within the sect had already risen to a certain level. He had been promoted from the dock steward to the head of the platoon. It was also because of this that he decided to introduce people to the gang from the village. Internal refinement. Ziyue's heart skipped a beat. Even now, he still had a deep impression of the might of Su Ming's punch. If internal refinement was already so strong, then how powerful would inner chi, which was 1 level higher than internal refinement, be? Moreover, from Su Ming's face, Ziyue could tell that the other party's internal refinement training was not profound. Evidently, there was still a lot of room for improvement. When he thought about the strength of martial arts, Ziyue could not help but yearn for it. He could not wait to head to Qinghe town. Soon, the group continued their journey. Let's move faster. This road is within the Ghost Head Stronghold's patrol area. If we encounter the Ghost Head Stronghold's people, it will be very troublesome. Suddenly, Su Ming said solemnly. Ziyue and the others' hearts tightened, and they hurriedly increased their pace. As people from the nearby village, they naturally knew about the Ghost Head Stronghold. They knew that there was a group of mountain bandits inside. They were vicious and had killed countless people. The government had tried to encircle and suppress them several times, but they had returned without success. They were very rampant. Fortunately, this road was not the Ghost Head Stronghold's main patrol area. After all, the people coming and going were all mountain people. They did not have enough resources and were not valued. Therefore, they passed through without any accidents. During this time, because they were hurrying, Ziyue had to continuously increase his physique. Otherwise, he would definitely not be able to hold on. As for Su Li, he had been carried by Su Ming halfway through the journey. On the other side, Zhang Guoyi's physique was indeed different from ordinary people. Although he was the same age as Ziyue, he was only slightly panting after a long journey. Su Ming saw the performance of the three people. He could not be too harsh on his nephew. Zhang Guoyi's physique was stronger, so it was not surprising that he was able to keep up with him. However, Ziyue's physique was clearly weaker than his nephew's, but he was able to grit his teeth and keep up without asking for his help. This really surprised him. When the sun set in the west, they finally saw Qinghe Town after a few hours of hurrying. Under the setting sun, it seemed to be enveloped by a ball of fire, emitting a red light. Under the tall city walls, the gate was wide open, and there were countless people going in and out. Qinghe Town. In this life, Ziyue was illiterate. The characters in his previous life were also different from the characters in this life. However, he was able to quickly determine that the three slightly complicated characters marked on the gate were the three words Qinghe Town. Ziyue made a mental note of these three words. He planned to start learning how to read while learning martial arts. He did not necessarily need to be proficient in literature or martial arts. However, learning how to read and distinguish between sentences would definitely be of great help to him when he came into contact with martial arts and secret manuals in the future. Even though Qinghe Town was a small town, there was an entrance fee to enter and exit. Regardless of goods, everyone had to pay at least 1 copper coin to enter and exit. Su Ming brought Ziyue and the other two and also paid 4 copper coins to pass through. So this is Qinghe Town. It is indeed bustling. Zhang Guoyi said in a daze. On the bustling streets, all sorts of strange things could be seen. The clothes of the people coming and going were much more extravagant than the people in the village. This was the first time he had stepped into a town, so he felt that everything was strange. This is the West District. Because it is close to the city gate, there are more people gathering here, forming a commercial street. However, the truly bustling place is the North Street. The government office, the branch of the Scorching Sun Gang, some dojos, academies, and restaurants are all there. That is where the rich people come and go. Su Ming explained with a smile. Ziyue did not say anything and secretly remembered all of this. Academies and dojos were places that he yearned to go to. However, he was clear that these were not things that he could come into contact with at the moment. Studying in the academy, the annual tuition fees and book fees were not something that his family could afford, not to mention the recommendation letter from the Shotsai master. As for dojos, the requirements were not that high, but the money spent to learn martial arts was definitely more than studying in an academy. Uncle Ming, what is going on over there? Suddenly, Ziyue pointed to a place not far away. Cici was mumbling, and countless people were gathered together. The execution platform, the place where the government executes the heinous criminals. Looking at the situation, it seems that someone is going to be executed. Su Ming said with a complicated expression. Those who could be executed were usually people with martial arts skills. To him, it was an insult to die on the execution platform. Of course, those who committed heinous crimes had only themselves to blame, and he would not sympathize with them. The execution platform. Ziyue's eyes lit up when he heard this. He quickly looked at Su Ming and said, "Can we go and take a look?" He had some expectations in his heart. Now that the spirit energy on his status panel had been depleted as his trump card, he naturally hoped to have more spirit energy. Although he could not actively kill people for spirit energy, he would not mind if he could obtain spirit energy through this passive method. Chapter 4. Okay. Su Ming glanced at them. Ziyue was eager to try. Zhang Guoyi looked confused, and his nephew Su Li was obviously timid. He also wanted to train them, so he didn't refuse and nodded decisively. With the strong Su Ming taking the lead, Ziyue and the others quickly came to the front. The first thing Ziyue saw was a burly man with steel shackles on his head and hands. His legs were also chained by long iron chains. He knelt on a stone platform that was about 20 square meters. The ground of the stone platform was dark red. Obviously, it was the bloodstains that couldn't be cleaned up due to too many beheadings. Next to him were several soldiers and an old executioner. In the distance, there was an executioner on the platform. It was said that he was Yang Zhengling, the guard of Qingatown. At this time, Ziyue and the others also knew the identity of the burly man kneeling on the platform. He was the fourth chief of the Ghost Head stronghold, Iron Arm Wu Liang. It was said that he encountered the second son of the Li family, Li Su, when he was intercepting the goods of the Li family's banquet hall and was directly captured. The Li family has 3 heroes. The eldest son, Li Qing, is in charge of the business and manages the banquet hall well. I heard that he has branches in the county. The second son, Li Su, is born with great strength and martial arts. The third son, Li Hun, is a real scholar. He is a literary star. This Ghost Head stronghold's Wu Liang targeted the Li family. It's a big mistake. Some people who knew were discussing excitedly. The Ghost Head stronghold killed and set fires. They are evil and should have been eradicated long ago. This time, the fourth chief was captured and beheaded. It's really exciting. Someone gnashed his teeth and said. Listening to the discussion, Ziyue also looked askance. This person was obviously someone who had suffered greatly. Kill! Right at this moment, Guardian Yang Zhengling shouted and tossed out a command medallion. Clang! The token fell on the stone platform and made a crisp sound. The old executioner picked up a bowl of wine and spat it on the blade. Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. You and I have no grudges in the past, and have no enmity today. This is my duty, and I am following orders. Sorry for the offense. As he spoke, he raised his broadsword. At this time, Iron Arm Hand Wu Liang seemed to be unwilling to bow down. He let out a shout, and the strength of his whole body tightened. His 2 thick arms immediately turned blue, and between the bulging muscles and blood vessels, they were incomparably hard. He was indeed worthy of the name Iron Arm Hand. Bang! The thick and solid iron buckle was forcefully torn apart, and the iron shackles cracked. However, it was all too late. The butcher's knife slashed down with extreme speed. Wu Liang suddenly froze. A trace of blood flowed out from his neck, gradually forming a thin line. Then, with a bang, his head fell off, revealing a bowl-sized wound below. Hot blood spurted out like a fountain. At this time, the old executioner had already picked up a rag and was gently wiping the bloodless broadsword. His calm face was as calm as before. Someone died. He was really dead. 1 slash, clean and tidy. Ziyue's eyes widened and then contracted violently. An uncontrollable feeling of nausea rose up, and then he could no longer suppress it. Blurg! Ziyue's face was deathly pale. He was about to vomit. Wei suggested to watch the beheading. He had already expected it to be bloody. He had already prepared himself mentally. He thought that the world was different. His previous life was peaceful, but this one was chaotic and vicious. He would face death sooner or later. Only by adapting as much as possible could he survive better. He was very rational and forced himself to open his eyes wide. However, in the instant that the bright red blood spurted out, his mind was already empty. An endless chill had completely extinguished all of his previous thoughts. After a long while, Bai Ziyue finally calmed down. Only then did he notice that he wasn't the only one vomiting. Su Li and Zhang Wei were also vomiting. Even some of the spectators in the surroundings had left behind a mess on the ground. Done? Su Ming glanced at Ziyue with a faint smile. After all, he was still a child. No matter how mature he pretended to be, he could not avoid being embarrassed at this moment. The 3 of them nodded with pale faces. Then let's go. It's already late. I'll arrange everything for you as soon as possible. Su Ming said and took the lead. Ziyue hurriedly followed, but a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. This time, watching the beheading was not in vain. Ziyue's data suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Name, Ziyue strength, 0. 26 plus speed, 0. 33 plus physique, 0. 49 plus martial arts, None spiritual energy. 837 on the status panel. The other data did not change. However, his spiritual energy had increased by more than 800 points. From Ziyue's point of view, this was definitely a huge number. One must know that back then, Little Ghost had only contributed 17 points to him. But this Ghost Head Stronghold's fourth chief, Iron Arm Wu Liang, had contributed almost 50 times more than Little Ghost. This was really beyond his expectations, and it made him incomparably surprised. However, this spiritual energy amount, what is the basis? Strength? Or other factors? Ziyue could not help but ponder. Little Chick was the weakest, so it only contributed 1 point of spiritual energy. Little Ghost was slightly stronger, giving 15 points. This Wu Yang's strength was strong, and he felt that he was not weaker than Uncle Ming. So he could contribute almost 1,000 points of spiritual energy? Uncle Ming, I wonder what level this Wu Liang's strength is at? Ziyue hurriedly asked. Iron Arm Wu Liang. I heard that he had already completed external refinement 3 years ago and entered internal refinement. His current strength should be slightly stronger than mine, right? Su Ming said with a serious face. He's that strong? Ziyue could not help but be startled. He had seen Uncle Ming's strength with his own eyes. His fist did not touch Little Ghost. Just the pressure of his chi and blood was enough to scatter Little Ghost's soul. This Wu Yang's strength was stronger than Uncle Ming, but he was only the fourth chief of the Ghost Head Stronghold. It could be imagined that the first 3 chiefs of the Ghost Head Stronghold must be even more terrifying. Uncle Ming, where are we going next? At this moment, Su Li asked. The first place we're going to is, of course, the Scorching Sun Gang's branch in Qinghe Town, North Street. There should be a small test there. As long as you pass the test, there will naturally be people who will arrange things for you. As expected, North Street was much more prosperous than West Street. There were restaurants that were 3 to 5 stories high and spacious silk shops. The fragrance of rouge and face powder overflowed from a shop filled with noble women. In a quiet bookstore, a group of scholars stared straight ahead. There was an antique shop, a painting pavilion, a pawn shop, and even a theater. Even though the sky had completely darkened, the rows of lanterns in the shops on both sides of North Street still illuminated the road with incomparable brightness. Even Ziyue, who believed that he had seen a lot of things, was dazzled when he saw so many scenes that resembled ancient times. Not to mention Su Li and Zhang Guai, who were practically leaving the village for the first time. But soon, as Su Ming's figure turned, they left the street area and arrived at a row of residential areas that were obviously rich and powerful. After a while, Su Ming stopped in his tracks. They had arrived at the Scorching Sun Gang's branch. Chapter 5. This was clearly a branch that had been transformed from a rich family's mansion. The stone lions on both sides were mighty and extraordinary. The gate was high, and there was a small door that could only allow 1 person to enter at a time. Su Ming's position in the Scorching Sun Gang was not low. Naturally, he could enter through the door. However, Ziyue and the others were not qualified. Of course, there was no need for that. Thus, Su Ming directly led the 3 of them along the outer wall and entered through the back door. Very soon, Bai Ziyue and the others saw that there were 7 or 8 children around their age in the backyard. They were standing together obediently. You guys go over and stand with them. I'll talk to the manager here. Don't worry, with my face, all you will pass the test. Su Ming said softly to Ziyue and the others. Then, he quickly left. Ziyue sized up these people. There were a total of 8 people, 5 boys and 3 girls. They were all 7 or 8 years old. They should be like them, children who had been introduced to be apprentices. Perhaps Su Ming's words were heard by them. When they saw Ziyue and the others approaching, their eyes were somewhat complicated. Ziyue had nothing to say about this. If he could smoothly enter the Scorching Sun Gang and become an apprentice, he would naturally not give up. After a while, Su Ming walked back with large strides. However, his expression was somewhat ugly. Ziyue's heart sank. He had a bad guess. As expected, his guess was quickly confirmed. Things are a bit difficult. The person in charge of the test this time is coincidentally not on good terms with me. Su Ming was somewhat depressed and embarrassed. He had already made a guarantee, but he did not expect that there would be twists and turns. Who would have thought that his opponent for the position of head of the docks would change after leaving the docks and become the logistics manager of the Scorching Sun Gang's branch? But you guys don't have to worry. I'll be watching the whole process. I don't think Zhang Bo will dare to deliberately make things difficult for you. Seeing the obvious panic on Su Li and Zhang Guai's faces, Su Ming hurriedly comforted them. Ziyue smiled bitterly. I'm afraid you're here. With Uncle Ming's absence, it would not be good for the other party to make things difficult for the children. However, with Uncle Ming around to protect them, the other party would take the opportunity to make things difficult for them. However, even if he understood this logic, he couldn't say it out loud. He could only suppress it and wait patiently. Soon, a group of people walked out of a house in the backyard. The leader of the group was a middle-aged man. He was thin and his face was fair. However, his eyes were very small. When he squinted, there seemed to be a flash of cold light, giving people an extremely cold feeling. Obviously, this was the Zhang Bo that Su Ming spoke of. Beside him were two youths, one fat and one skinny. They were slightly behind by half a figure, and their attitude was humble and respectful. They did not dare to walk in front. This is Steward Zhang, the logistics manager of our Scorching Sun Gang branch. Why aren't you coming over to greet him? The thin youth beside Zhang Bo snorted coldly and said, Hello, Steward Zhang. All the children immediately stepped forward and said timidly, You're just pretending. Su Ming snorted coldly. He couldn't stand it. Zhang Bo's expression did not change. He looked at the 11 children in front of him. Among them, Ziyue, Su Li, and Zhang Guai were relatively close to each other. Su Li would occasionally look at Su Ming with a pleading look. In addition, the two of them looked somewhat similar, so he had a plan in mind. It's already late. I won't take up any more of your time. Do any of you know how to read? Stand aside, Zhang Bo said with an indifferent gaze. Hearing this, Ziyue's expression changed. He could not help but reveal a helpless expression. He could read, but it was the language of his previous life. In this life, he naturally did not have the opportunity to read. Knowing the importance of learning how to read, he decided once again to solve the problem of literacy as soon as possible. However, at this moment, a child took a small step forward and quickly retreated timidly. What are you doing? The thin youth glared at him. I know how to write my name. The child said timidly. What's the use of just 2 words? Stand there obediently. The youth snorted coldly and swept his gaze over everyone. The child immediately did not dare to make a sound. The others also stood motionless in the same place. Obviously, none of the 11 children were literate. However, this was normal. Which one of them who could read was not from a wealthy family? Naturally, it was impossible for them to come to the Scorching Sun Gang to apply for an apprenticeship. Only children from poor families like Ziyue would think of a way to survive here. Since no one is literate, then if you want to enter the Scorching Sun Gang, you can only rely on your strength. Do you see those stone blocks over there? 50 kilograms for boys and 30 kilograms for girls. Whoever can lift the stone blocks over their shoulders and walk 10 steps will pass the test. Zhang Bo pointed to the stone blocks at the edge of the courtyard and said indifferently. Those stone blocks were obviously used by the disciples of the Scorching Sun Gang to train their strength. They were piled up by the wall, and each of them was marked with their weight. 50 kilograms. The children's faces changed color. If I remember correctly, in the previous tests, the boys only needed to lift 30 kilograms of stone blocks, and the girls only needed 20 kilograms to pass the test. You directly doubled it. Isn't it a bit too much? Su Ming's expression also changed when he heard this and said coldly, Children of 7 or 8 years old, but less than 10 years old had limited strength, not to mention these people who came from poor families. They probably could only eat meat during the holidays. Each of them was skinny and had limited strength, not to mention 50 kilograms of stone blocks. Even lifting 30 kilograms of stone blocks would be difficult, let alone walking 10 steps. Su Ming did not care much about the others. However, among the 3 people he brought, apart from Zhang Guoyi, who seemed to have some strength and might be able to pass. Yue and Suli were both very thin and weak. It would be extremely difficult for them to pass. Do I have the final say here, or do you have the final say? Not to mention that you don't have the qualifications to give orders here. Even if you did, Protector Liu Yang said that it would be better to have nothing than to have something substandard. Could it be that you dare to doubt Protector Liu Yang's words? Zhang Bo smiled coldly, and a trace of satisfaction flashed through his eyes. He remembered how he had lost miserably in the competition for the head of the docks. Su Ming was speechless, and his expression was extremely ugly. The Scorching Sun Gang was only a branch in Qingatown. The person with the highest status was the leader of the gang, Lu Dong, and below him were Left Protector Zhao Jing and Right Protector Liu Yang. Although he had some status at the Qinghe Pier, he did not have the authority to speak in front of Protector Liu Yang. Although he was very clear that perhaps Protector Liu Yang had indeed said that it would be better to have nothing than to have something substandard, it was also a fact that Zhang Bo was using Protector Liu Yang to suppress him at this moment. What made him even more helpless was that he did not dare to refute. What are you standing there for? If you want to try, then try. If not, hurry up and go back to where you came from. Smiling proudly, Zhang Bo did not have a good expression towards Ziyue and the others. I'll give it a try. Ziyue was about to step forward, but Zhang Guoyi stepped forward first. Chapter 6. Although Zhang Guoyi was about the same age as Ziyue and the others, he was taller than them by a head and looked very strong. His physique and strength were clearly far superior to ordinary people. He strode forward and quickly arrived in front of the stone block that was equivalent to 50 pounds. He bent down and grabbed the handle of the stone block with both hands. Up! Zhang Guoyi exerted all his strength. His arms and neck seemed to have become thicker. He lifted the heavy stone block and carried it on his shoulders. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, soon he took 10 steps. Dong! The sound of the heavy stone block falling to the ground was heard. Zhang Guoyi hurriedly put down the stone block and stood to the side, panting. Obviously, even if his physique was good and was better than his peers, it was still difficult for him to continue lifting such a heavy object. Okay, you pass. Stand over here. Zhang Bo did not make things difficult for him and nodded lightly. Yes, Zhang Guoyi hurriedly responded. He knew that he had passed the test and quickly stood over. It seemed that Zhang Guoyi's success gave the other children some hope. Soon, there were people who came forward to try. At the same time, there were also girls who ran to the side of the 30-pound stone block and wanted to try. Unfortunately, no matter how hard they tried, they could barely lift the stone block. Some of them were so weak that they couldn't even move the stone block slightly, let alone lift it up and walk 10 steps. Let's go. I'll help you think of a way when we get back. At this time, Su Ming came closer and said in a low voice. Suli nodded dejectedly. He had tried just now, but the stone block did not move at all. Naturally, he knew that he could not pass the test. Uncle Ming, I want to try. Ziyue's face was serious. As he spoke, he walked directly to the stone block. He naturally knew that since Uncle Ming said that he would help him think of a way, he would definitely be able to arrange it for him and would not let them return to the village with their tails between their legs. Perhaps it was not the Scorching Sun Gang, but there would be other places for them to stay. However, he had never forgotten his purpose of coming to Qingatown, which was to learn martial arts. If he did not join the Scorching Sun Gang, how could he learn martial arts? He might be able to make a living as an apprentice in some shops, but he would definitely not have the opportunity to learn martial arts. Therefore, even if this test was difficult, he had to give it a try. Of course, he had enough confidence. Name: Ziyue strength 0, 26 plus speed 0, 33 plus physique 0, 49 plus martial arts. Non-spiritual energy 837 by Ziyue's consciousness was in a daze as he tapped on the power button. Immediately, his soul energy was rapidly consumed, and his strength was rapidly increasing. In that instant, it was as if he had gone through countless training sessions. He could clearly feel his strength growing. Even his originally thin and weak body and arms had become thicker and thicker, with some muscles faintly appearing. However, when his two's strength increased, reached the limit, Bai Ziyu frowned, but after thinking about it, it was normal. This kind of increase could not be limitless because the human body had its limits. At his age, his physique, meridians, and bones were all very weak and tender. If he continued to increase them, it would probably cause some bad things to happen and affect his future growth. Even now, he still felt a swelling sensation, and it was very uncomfortable. However, he quickly realized that this discomfort was mostly caused by the imbalance between his speed, physique, and strength. Therefore, after thinking about it, he did not hesitate and continued to add points. Anyway, because of Iron Arm Wu Liang, he had a lot of spiritual energy, so he did not mind this little consumption. Soon, Ziyu felt his entire body surging with heat, especially his legs. The surging power actually made him grow a little taller. At this moment, he actually felt a kind of power. Although this kind of power was far inferior to ordinary people, let alone martial artists. Name: Ziyu strength, 0. 5 speed, 0. 5 physique, 0. 5 martial arts. None spiritual energy. 795 as expected. After increasing my strength, speed, and physique to the limit, there are no more signs indicating that I can increase them. Obviously, his current state should be the limit of what he could achieve. If he wanted to increase them, he would have to rely on other methods. Ziyu's greatest expectation was still martial arts. However, if he wanted to learn martial arts, he first needed to join the Scorching Sun Gang. Therefore, he quickly gathered his thoughts and stretched out his hands to grab the handle of the stone block. Up! With a muffled groan, Ziyu's body tensed up. The veins on his neck and head bulged. "You lifted it," a child exclaimed. Ziyu used all his strength to lift the stone block and slowly raised it above his shoulders. Then he took one step at a time. With every step he took, he could clearly feel the weight on his body pressing down on his legs. This pressure was so great that he would not be able to withstand it in the past. However, under the condition of increasing his physique and speed, his legs seemed to have gone through countless training and became much stronger. He could completely withstand it. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Soon, Ziyu completed all 10 steps. He slowly squatted down, and the stone block fell to the ground again with a muffled thud. "You pass." Zhang Bo's expression was strange, but he still nodded slowly. He did not expect that the 2 people who passed the test were introduced by him. He wanted to make things difficult for Sumi. Ziyu was delighted and finally let out a long sigh of relief. After passing the test, he was 1 step closer to learning martial arts. All right, the test is over. Those who did not pass can return to where they came from. The 2 of you follow Wang Jian. He will make arrangements for you. Zhang Bo chuckled and turned to leave. Wang Jian was the tall and skinny young man standing behind Zhang Bo. He waved at Ziyu and Zhang Guai. He did not give them a chance to say goodbye to Su Ming, nor did he intend to talk to them. He walked ahead of them. The 2 hurriedly followed him. "Mount Ziyu, why do I feel that you have grown taller?" On the way, Zhang Guai asked in a low voice. "No, it's not." Ziyu's expression did not change. He knew that it was because he had used his soul power to increase his soul power. This could be considered a side effect. Ziyu made a mental note. If he wanted to increase his soul power in the future, he could not rashly increase his soul power by too much. Soon, under Wang Jian's lead, Ziyu and Zhang Guai arrived at a place that looked like a courtyard. "Senior brother Wang, are there only 2 of us today?" A man with a small beard and a long and narrow scar on his face, from his eye bone to his chin, saw Wang Jian and hurriedly walked up to him. Seeing that there were only 2 young men behind Wang Jian, he could not help but show a surprised look. "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." Wang Jian snorted with an unfriendly look. He glanced at Ziyu and Zhang Guai and said, "These 2, register them as apprentices." Chapter 7. "Yes, Senior Wang." The scar man glanced at by Ziyu and Zhang Guai with a strange look. He muttered to himself, but still hurriedly agreed. Ziyue's heart sank. Even though he didn't know how they were treated as apprentices, he knew that they were being targeted. Follow me. After Wang Jian left, the scar-faced man brought them into a room. He took out a pen and a book to register them. What are your names? Where are you from? Who are your parents? Tell me everything. Ziyue, from Cloud Leaf Village. Parents. By Ziyue knew that this was a form of registration, which meant that they were officially recognized as members of the Radiant Sun Gang. Even though he was only an apprentice, a so-called chore apprentice, he didn't dare to be negligent and answered in full detail. Zhang Guai, also from Cloud Leaf Village. Parents are dead. Zhang Guai followed suit and also introduced his own situation. Ziyue, Zhang Guai. These names are not bad. The scar-faced man nodded slowly. Normally, the names given by the villagers were very simple. Erlung, Guzi, Sanyo, and so on were simple and easy to remember. There's an old Tongsheng in our village. Our names were all given by him. Ziyue said hurriedly. The scar-faced man nodded. He didn't really care about these things. Soon, his expression became indifferent and solemn. Since you've joined the Scorching Sun Gang, you have to follow the rules of the Scorching Sun Gang. The 3 rules, 5 laws, and 12 laws. Remember them all. If you violate them, you'll be implicated. If it's serious, do you see the registration information? Even your parents and relatives will be implicated. As he spoke, he pointed at the information of Ziyue and the others in the book. His tone was threatening. Both of their faces turned pale. Of course, with your status, you don't have the right to make such a big mistake. Next, I'll tell you about your status and responsibilities. In the Scorching Sun Gang, there are 3 types of apprentices. They are inner apprentices, outer apprentices, and miscellaneous apprentices like you. At this point, the scarred man paused for a moment before continuing. Normally, newly recruited apprentices will start as outer apprentices. After a month of assessment, if their performance is not good or they make mistakes, they will be demoted to odd jobs apprentices. As for you guys, it's obvious that you've offended someone. Senior Wang, right? He laughed mockingly. His hideous scar looked like a centipede. No. How could he do that? Zhang Guai said in a panic. He was at a loss. No one would be happy to hear that they had been relegated to the lowest-ranked miscellaneous apprentice from the very beginning. Bai Ziyue naturally knew the reason and could only smile bitterly. All right, since Senior Wang said that you'll be relegated to miscellaneous apprentices, you can only accept your fate. I have no right to change it. However, it's not like miscellaneous apprentices don't have a chance to become outer apprentices or even inner apprentices. Anyway, the apprenticeship period is 5 years. As long as you perform well, you'll have a chance to be promoted. Also, there's a benefit to being an outer apprentice. Outer and inner apprentices don't get to enjoy it, and that's you can get paid. Although it's not much, it's better than nothing, isn't it? The scar-faced man waved his hand and said jokingly, Senior, what do miscellaneous apprentices do? Can they learn martial arts? Ziyue didn't care about his status. His goal was as clear as ever. You can call me Mr. Qian. The scar-faced man first introduced himself before continuing. Of course you can learn martial arts. The Scorching Sun Gang has relied on martial arts to achieve our current status. Also, it's worth mentioning that when a miscellaneous apprentice is promoted to an outer apprentice, other than gaining great merits, the biggest opportunity is to learn martial arts. Generally, miscellaneous apprentices can apply for a day every month to learn martial arts. Almost every morning, there will be someone in the gang teaching the outer and inner apprentices martial arts. You can also learn from them. As for whether or not you can receive guidance from your senior brothers and learn martial arts, it's all up to you. However, miscellaneous apprentices have to work. There are so many chores that you can't finish every day. How can you have time to learn martial arts? So, I advise you to accept your fate. Mr. Qian shook his head slowly. He had seen many children who wanted to rely on martial arts to change their fate. In the first few months, they would come to learn, but after a period of failure, they would all give up. Then, Mr. Qian, I apply to start learning martial arts tomorrow. Is that okay? Ziyue's eyes lit up and quickly said, I also want to learn martial arts tomorrow. Zhang Guai, who was standing at the side, was not stupid. You're smart. Mr. Qian smiled faintly. He didn't have any bad feelings towards Ziyue and Zhangguai. They were both children, so he naturally didn't deliberately make things difficult for them. I can finally learn martial arts. Outer forging, inner refining, and inner qi. I don't know what real martial arts are like. Ziyue lay on the bed, secretly looking forward to it. At this time, he was in a small house that looked a little shabby. There was a big bed that stretched from one side of the wall to the other. A total of 9 teenagers slept together. This was the place that Mr. Qian arranged for them to stay temporarily. Zhang Guai slept next to him. As for the others, they were all miscellaneous apprentices. Some of them came only a few days earlier than them, but they were all arranged to work in the mansion of the Scorching Sun Gang branch. According to them, the miscellaneous apprentices might be assigned to other places. Therefore, they were only staying here temporarily. If they were sent to other properties of the Scorching Sun Gang, they would naturally have to leave. According to them, the miscellaneous apprentices were divided into internal and external miscellaneous apprentices. They could stay in a mansion of the Scorching Sun Gang branch, so they were considered internal miscellaneous apprentices. Those who worked outside were considered external miscellaneous apprentices and had a lower status than them. At the very least, they all looked down on foreign apprentices. Mount Ziyue, do you think we could be as good as Uncle Ming when we learn martial arts? I heard that Uncle Ming once went up the mountain alone and killed a 700-pound tiger. If we learn martial arts and are as good as Uncle Ming, we'll have a bright future and won't have to worry about starving anymore. By the way, speaking of food, the food here is really good. The pancakes that are as big as my face are really delicious. Zhang Guai was drooling as he spoke. In the village, his parents died and he lived with his uncle. He ate poorly and rarely had enough to eat. The pancakes at night were already the best food in his eyes. Yes, I definitely will, Ziyue said firmly. In his heart, even Uncle Ming was not his goal. This was because everything he experienced today made him understand that even in this small Qinghe town, there were many people who were stronger than Uncle Ming. For example, the 4th bandit chief of the Ghost Head stronghold, Iron Hand Wu Liang, who had been beheaded, Li Su, one of the 3 heroes of the Li family who had captured Iron Hand Wu Liang, and the protector Liu Yang mentioned by the logistics manager Zhang Bo. Not to mention, there was an even bigger world outside of Qinghe town. Chapter 8. The next day, before dawn, Ziyue was awakened by the creaking sound of the door opening. Opening his eyes, he saw that in the dark room, the other children on the big bed had all gotten up and started their day's complicated work. Because he and Zhang Guai had both applied to learn martial arts today, Mr. Qian did not arrange for them to work. However, Ziyue quickly got up and put on his clothes. Mount Ziyue, what time is it now? Zhang Guai was awakened by Ziyue's movement and opened his eyes. It was just 3 in the morning. Yesterday, Mr. Qian also said that at the end of 3 in the morning, there will be apprentices practicing martial arts in the martial arts practice field. Let's go there early and try to learn more, Ziyue said and got out of bed. According to the time in his previous life, 3 in the morning was between 4 and 6 in the morning. He always knew that in any era, there would be people who were diligent. Even if there were people who started practicing martial arts at 6 in the morning, he did not want to miss it because of a moment of laziness. Then wait for me. Zhang Gui also quickly got up. Half an hour later, the two of them came to the martial arts practice field together. The so-called martial arts practice field was actually a flat courtyard. In the corner, there were a few stone blocks for training strength, and there was a weapon rack at the edge. Of course, there were no real bladed weapons on the rack, but knives, spears, swords, and other items made of hardwood. Ziyue thought that they were early enough, but he did not expect someone to be even earlier than them. In the corner of the martial arts practice field, there was a 10-year-old boy practicing his stance. The stance he was practicing was completely different from the fixed stance Ziyue imagined. He was practicing a type of moving stance. His footsteps were fixed in place, but his body was shaking rhythmically. Sometimes it was slow, sometimes it was fast, sometimes it was up and down. Sometimes it was like a person riding a horse, moving up and down. Sometimes it was like a snake sitting cross-legged, twisting and turning. It was extremely flexible. Hey, there's someone over there. The sky was still a little dark, and Zhang Wei only just noticed the young man standing in the corner. He hurriedly called out and wanted to go closer, but was stopped by Ziyue. Since the young man was practicing martial arts, he must have purposely stood in a corner so that no one would disturb him. If they went over, they would only be asking for a snub. Thus, the two of them stood on the other side and carefully observed each other's cultivation. The youngster's movements were smooth and natural, but in the end, the movements were actually very simple. There were 7 or 8 consecutive movements, and Ziyue quickly memorized them. Zhang Guai, who was at the side, had already started to imitate and practice. However, it was clear that no matter how well he practiced, in Zhang Guai's eyes, he was still 1,000 times worse than the youth. It was as if he lacked a certain charm. The movements aren't difficult, but the martial arts aren't that simple. Ziyue frowned slightly. He could see that the young man's movements were very natural. Every movement did not seem to be done deliberately, but there was a kind of internal force that drove him to use it. Strong. It should be a kind of internal circulating force. Ziyue had a guess in his mind. Although he had never practiced martial arts, he was quite knowledgeable in his previous life, and after a little analysis, he had an answer. However, this answer was not necessarily a good thing for him, because if he did not understand the way the force was circulating, he would not be able to truly learn this stance. You will never be able to master the Diana stance like this. At some point, the young man had already finished his practice. When he saw the two of them, he walked over. "How should I address you, senior? Please give me some pointers." Ziyue was surprised, then delighted, and quickly opened his mouth. "My name is Qin Xiaoping. I just came here a few months earlier than you, so there's no need to be so polite. You should be new apprentices of the Scorching Sun Gang. New apprentices can only learn the Diana stance. Only when the Diana stance is mastered and the Diana stance can you be allowed to practice other self-defense martial arts." The young man waved his hand reservedly and explained. Ziyue suddenly understood, and then said with a face full of expectation, "Looking at Senior Qin's practice, the Diana stance has obviously turned into a Diana stance. Can you teach us how to practice the Diana stance?" The true essence of the Diana stance lies in the word Diana. Diana does not mean to be motionless. There's a force circulating within it. Only by following the flow of the force and circulating it throughout the body can you train the body and strengthen your qi and blood. Although I have mastered the Diana stance, I can't give you any pointers on the practice of the Diana stance. There are instructors here every day to guide you. They have all mastered the Diana stance and can use force from a distance. When you find the instructors, they will naturally transfer their force to you. When the force enters your body, it will be much easier for you to practice the Diana stance. Generally speaking, after 3 to 5 times, you will be able to directly master it. Qin Xiaoping waved his hand and said with a smile, "Thank you for your pointers, Senior Qin." Ziyue was not disappointed when he heard this and quickly thanked him. Knowing that his practice was completely useless, Zhang Guai did not continue to practice. Therefore, the two of them stood at the side again and looked enviously at Qin Xiaoping's practice. This time, Qin Xiaoping was practicing a fist technique. As he moved his feet, the force burst forth. His movements were also simple, and there was nothing special about it. However, at this moment, Ziyue did not have any thoughts of trying out again after memorizing it. This was because there was definitely force circulating in his fist technique. If he did not know the secret of the force circulation, he would only be using a death punch. He would only have brute force, but not much power. Furthermore, he might even injure himself. As time passed, the number of people in the martial arts practice field gradually increased. Most of them were 8 or 9 years old, and some were in their teens. Most of them were outer disciple who had already practiced the meditation stance. When they arrived at the martial arts practice field, they did not greet each other. Instead, they all got into their postures and stood in the meditation stance. From this, Ziyue was surprised to find that Qin Xiaoping's progress was definitely the fastest among all of them. In terms of practicing the meditation stance, other than him who had already practiced the fixed stance and living stance and had achieved a small success in meditation stance, there were only 2 other people who had achieved this. However, these 2 people looked to be 1 or 2 years older than the average disciple. Moreover, in terms of the fluidity of the starting stance, these 2 people were far inferior to Qin Xiaoping. I didn't expect Senior Qin to be a little genius. However, judging from his diligence in practicing at such a young age, it is very normal for him to have such results. Ziyue had heard that the other party had only arrived a few months earlier than them. Master Honggang is here. Suddenly, an apprentice spoke. Immediately after, Ziyue saw a fat and muscular man walking over from afar. It's him. Ziyue's eyes flashed. He had already recognized this so-called instructor. It was the fat man who had stood behind Zhang Bo, the logistics manager, yesterday. At this moment, his face was indifferent as he strode into the martial arts practice field. He looked coldly at the crowd and said, "Those who have not learned the meditation stance, stand over here." Chapter 9. Soon, 5 or 6 people arrived in front of Instructor Honggang. Ziyue and Zhang Guai looked at each other and also leaned over with anticipation. "Stand properly." Honggang stretched out his hands behind his back and looked at the 8 people in front of him. The Diana stance is the Scorching Sun Gang's basic external training method. Although this external training method is basic, it is very important. It can strengthen your qi and blood and integrate your force. Once your force is formed, your strength will be different. Only then can you be called a martial artist and be considered a member of the Jianghu. However, I have to remind you that the Diana stance is not to be taught to outsiders. Not only the Diana stance, but all the martial arts you learn here are not to be taught to outsiders. If you are found out, even if I don't find trouble with you, the law enforcement disciples of the Scorching Sun Gang will find trouble with you. When that time comes, you can only pray that you can run far away. He smiled coldly, but the corners of his eyes were twitching. Obviously, he was very wary of the law enforcement disciples, and even a little afraid of them. None of the apprentices spoke. Only their tightly pursed lips showed their nervousness. The posture of the Diana stance is very simple. Even if some of you haven't practiced it before, you should be able to remember it by watching others practice. So, what I'm going to teach you next is the way to circulate your force. Honggang kept a straight face and continued to speak. Ziyue was secretly excited. They were finally going to officially start practicing martial arts. However, he did not notice that the other apprentices did not show any joy on their faces. Instead, their faces were tense and they looked nervous. Stand properly in the Diana stance. I will transfer the force to you. Honggang walked in front of one of the apprentices. That apprentice quickly stood up in the Diana stance. His footsteps were steady, his waist and legs were together, and his hands were spread out. Transferring force once every 10 days. This is your 3rd time. After 3 times, if you still haven't mastered the Diana stance, you don't have to come anymore. Go report to Qian Ming and be transferred to a miscellaneous apprentice. As Honggang spoke, he reached out and patted the apprentice's body. Bam! With a muffled sound, a special force immediately entered the apprentice's body. When this strange power entered his body, it seemed to cause him great pain. His face twisted because of it. Carefully feel the changes in this force. Honggang said indifferently as he walked towards the second acolyte. Without wasting any time, he struck out with his palm again. The apprentice couldn't bear the pain and started screaming. If you don't even have the slightest bit of patience, what's the point of practicing martial arts? You don't have to come here next time. You are not qualified to accept my strength transfer. Honggang's face was cold and indifferent. He directly deprived that apprentice of his right to transmit strength in the future. If he couldn't master the Diana stance after this, there would be no chance for him to master it. The apprentice's face was pale, and he felt so wrong that he was about to cry. However, he didn't dare to make a sound. He could only stand still and carefully feel the changes in the force in his body, hoping that he could get started. After that, no one dared to make a sound, no matter how much pain they were in. Even the muffled groans caused by the pain made the apprentices' hearts skip a beat. They were afraid that they would be scolded. Soon, Hong Gang was standing in front of Ziyue. He, who had long been prepared, stood in the meditative stance, his body tensed and his mouth tightly pursed. Bang! With a muffled sound, Ziyue immediately felt a scorching force enter his body from his shoulder. This force seemed to have a strong destructive force that was wantonly destroying his body. He resisted the urge to groan. It seemed like a long time had passed, but it also seemed like it was only a moment. This force finally dissipated and vibrated in a unique pattern. This should be the magical effect of the dhyana stance's force circulation. Bai Ziyue was secretly excited as he carefully sensed the rhythm of the trembling. Following this rhythm, he constantly adjusted his standing posture. 1 vibration, 2 vibrations, 3 vibrations, the force gradually weakened. Ziyue felt extremely regretful. However, he quickly pulled himself together and familiarized himself with this feeling. He began to adjust the flow of blood in his body according to the pattern. After an unknown period of time, Ziyue let out a long breath and opened his eyes. He couldn't wait to look at his attributes panel. Name, Ziyue strength, 0. 51, cannot be improved. Speed, 0. 51, cannot be improved. Vitality, 0. 52, cannot be improved. Martial arts, dhyana stance, uninitiated, cannot be improved. Spiritual energy, 795-inch martial arts is finally not a blank slate. Ziyue was overjoyed. Even though he had not been initiated, he could see the hope of rapid improvement. This was because from the attributes panel, he could easily determine that once he had initiated the dhyana stance, he would be able to use his spiritual energy to increase it to a small success or even higher level. Moreover, he had only just started to cultivate, but his strength, speed, and vitality had all increased to a certain extent. It was obvious that the cannot be improved on the attributes panel was just a limit on growth. However, martial arts could break this limit. Next, you can cultivate on your own. If you can achieve a state where you are still and your sweat forms droplets, then you can be considered to have initiated the dhyana stance. If you can do it within 10 days, you will be promoted to an inner disciple. If you can do it within 30 days, you will retain your status as an outer disciple. You will stay in the branch and continue to cultivate. The sect will also spend a large amount of resources to nurture you. After 5 years, you will become an official sect disciple. Not only will you receive a monthly allowance, but there will also be many missions for you to earn extra money. However, if you can't initiate the dhyana stance within 30 days, then you will obediently report to Qian Ming and become an errand boy disciple. When you have achieved a small success in the dhyana stance, then you will have the opportunity to return to the branch and learn other martial arts. Seeing that everyone was awake, Hong Gang gave a routine instruction. He reached his hand behind his back again and left. Mount Ziyue, how do you feel? It hurts here. Only after Hong Gang left did Zhang Guo dare to come closer. He pointed at his shoulder and said with a sad face. His clothes were the same as Ziyue's, made of coarse linen. When Hong Gang slapped him, the force of his slap had already broken it. Through the hole in his clothes, Ziyue could clearly see that his shoulder was already bruised. Luckily, I can endure it. The corner of Ziyue's mouth twitched. His situation was not much better than Zhang Guo's. Perhaps it was because his skin was fairer, but the exposed area where he was slapped was not only bruised, but there was also some extravasated blood oozing out. It was very frightening. However, he also knew that Hong Gang was not purposely targeting them. Although the force delivered through the air was painful and caused great harm to their bodies, it would allow them to initiate the dhyana stance faster. They will be able to judge the pros and cons. Chapter 10. Breakfast was just a bowl of porridge and a few pickles. The two of them were full and couldn't wait to continue practicing the dhyana stance, hoping to get started as soon as possible. However, The pain in their shoulders seemed to have exploded. It was so painful that they couldn't even lift their arms. They couldn't bear it anymore and had to ask Mr. Chien. Finally, they were allowed to walk out of the scorching Sun Gang branch and go to a nearby clinic to buy medicine. North Street was as bustling as ever. People kept going in and out of the shops on both sides of the street. Rich young masters, rich ladies, and Jianghu swordsmen wandered around. Bai Ziyue and Zhang Guai, who were dressed in coarse hemp, seemed out of place among the crowd. They tried to walk on the edge of the road to avoid other pedestrians. Of course, there were also medical centers during this period. However, medical centers that could be open on North Street, even if they were the most basic ones, were not affordable. Therefore, when they were almost out of the North Street area, the two of them found a small clinic in a remote alley. There were no other patients in the clinic at this time. A middle-aged doctor was sitting inside, holding a book and reading leisurely. Not far away, there was a medicine boy who was carefully and seriously grinding some medicine. Dr. Ziyue and Zhang Guai stepped in nervously. Money was the courage of people. Ziyue was a little nervous with the 3 coins his mother gave him in his arms. They must have been injured by forced transmission. Medicine boy, give them 2 pieces of black ointment. The doctor just glanced at the two of them and made a judgment. The medicine boy quickly put down the grinding stick in his hand and took out 2 pieces of black ointment wrapped in paper from a compartment. How much is it? Ziyue asked hurriedly. 30 coins. Put it on for a day and the swelling will go down. You will recover in 2 to 3 days. The medicine boy said skillfully. Here is the money. Ziyue breathed a sigh of relief. 30 coins was not expensive and was within the range he could afford. Take off your clothes. I will put on for you. The medicine boy gave the change and said kindly, Thank you. Ziyue was not polite and simply took off his clothes. On Ziyue's thin and weak body, there were faint lines of muscles. When he slightly tightened, 6 muscles on his stomach were revealed. However, on his well-proportioned figure, the bruises on his shoulders were a ghastly sight. Without any nonsense, the medicine boy tore open the paper and slapped the black paper ointment down. Ziyue sucked in a breath of cold air. Immediately after, he felt an endless stream of coolness coming from the ointment. His arm, which was originally numb and difficult to move, suddenly felt much more relaxed. After a few breaths, he was able to lift his arm slightly, and it was no longer as unbearable as before. It feels so good. Zhang Guai let out a strange cry and grinned. After putting on his clothes, Ziyue hesitated for a moment before walking in front of the middle-aged doctor. He bowed and said, Doctor, I want to learn how to read. Do you think there are any books that can help me learn how to read? Oh, the middle-aged doctor was a little interested. He said with a smile, It is rare to see such ambition at such a young age. Looking at your appearance, you should be new apprentices from some place. You are also from a poor family and do not have much money to study in a private school. However, you need someone to teach you how to read, how to write, and what it means. You need someone to teach you how to read. It is very difficult to grasp knowledge by self-study. I don't have enough money to hire someone to teach me how to read. Moreover, I don't have the time to learn. Therefore, I want to learn how to read by myself. Please recommend a book for beginners. If there are words that I do not know, I can ask someone. Ziyue said sincerely. In fact, with the knowledge from his previous life, Ziyue believed that he would not have any difficulties in understanding and writing words. Although the two worlds were different, there were always similarities. What he lacked was the knowledge of the words of this world. He was also an extremely smart person. Along the way, he had already learned about a dozen words by looking at the signs of the surrounding shops. He believed that he would be able to grasp more and more words by analogy. Good, you are ambitious. Go out and walk 300 meters to the right. There's an old Sheen bookstore. You can ask the bookstore owner for a book called Diagram Analysis. It is suitable for your situation, the middle-aged doctor said with a smile. If it was a child who studied in a private school, it would naturally be suitable for the 3-character classic and 100 family names. However, for someone like Bai Ziyue who had no teacher to teach him, it was naturally more suitable for him to learn words by relying on pictures in the brief explanation of pictures and figures. Thank you, Master Doctor. Ziyue thanked him respectfully. Mount Ziyue, I will pay you back the money for the ointment after I receive my salary. Zhang Guai said in a low voice as they walked out of the clinic. No problem. Ziyue waved his hand. Even if he did not have much money, he did not care about this small amount of money. But, are you really going to buy a book? We are illiterate. Is it necessary? Zhang Guai asked with some doubts. It is necessary. Ziyue turned to look at him and said seriously, Zhang Guai, we are from the same village and should take care of each other. But similarly, if you don't work hard, no one can help you. If you want to succeed here, martial arts is very important, but literacy is also very important. For example, if you're lucky enough to get a martial arts secret book, but you are illiterate, won't you miss it? Seems like it. Zhang Guai nodded in confusion, but still said with some distress, I know that reading books is useful. If you can read, it will be easier to find a job. But I can't do it. No one in my family has been literate for 8 generations. I can't do it. Ziyue shook his head helplessly and did not try to persuade him again. Everyone had their own choice. If you don't work hard, it would be useless for others to be anxious. Soon, a bookstore appeared in front of them. Old Qin Bookstore. Bai Ziyue stared deeply at the signboard. From the doctor's words, the number of words he could recognize increased by 4. 10 minutes later, Ziyue walked out of Old Qin Bookstore with satisfaction. In his hand, there was a book half a finger thick with pictures and text. It was the illustration of pictures that the middle-aged doctor said. In the illustration of pictures, there would often be a picture deliberately drawn and then a few words written next to it for comparison. For example, a snake was drawn in the book, and the word snake was written next to it. It could be said that the comparison was clear and clear. In this way, the speed of my literacy will be greatly improved. The only thing I can't do is that the price of this book is really too expensive. Ziyue's face showed a trace of pain. 2 pieces of black paper paste only cost him 30 copper coins, but an illustration of pictures cost 120 copper coins. It was really expensive, but books have always been more expensive, and he could not do anything about it. Chapter 11. Ziyue and Zhang Guai had just entered the scorching Sun Gang's branch. Suddenly, Zhang Guai tugged on Ziyue's clothes. It's that Wang Jian. A tall and skinny young man walked towards them. It was Wang Jian, the one who had directly demoted them to odd job apprentice yesterday. Greetings, senior. Although he was unhappy, Ziyue still greeted him obediently. When Zhang Guai saw this, he quickly lowered his head and put on a respectful look. In a short time, they had already seen the strict hierarchy in the Scorching Sun Gang. Odd job apprentices had the lowest status here. Official disciples could even scold and beat them without any punishment. Wang Jian glanced at the 2 of them indifferently and walked past them as if he did not care about them at all. Seeing this, Ziyue breathed a sigh of relief. He felt that it was better for Wang Jian to ignore them. If Wang Jian really wanted to talk to them, it would be troublesome, but despicable. After Wang Jian left, Zhang Guai cursed in a low voice. Ziyue did not know whether to laugh or cry when he heard this. However, he also knew that this was just a way for him to vent his anger. The 2 of them had been treated unfairly from the beginning. After passing the test, they were directly assigned to the lowest status of odd job apprentice. Anyone would be angry. However, Ziyue knew that they did not have anyone to rely on here. Even Uncle Ming did not have any authority here. Keeping a low profile was the best way to deal with this. In the future, when they were stronger and more confident, they would have a chance to take revenge. The middle-aged doctor's black paper ointment was very effective. In just 1 or 2 hours, Ziyue felt that his arm did not hurt as much. Although he would still feel discomfort if he touched it, it did not affect him much. Therefore, after having lunch in the branch's cafeteria, he quickly went to the training field, found a corner, and stood in the Zen stance. As for Zhang Guai, after staying for 1 or 2 hours, he could not stand it anymore and left. The Dhyana stance trains chi and blood, as well as force. Although the force that Master Hong Gang transmitted through the air allowed me to feel the force that was cultivated from the Diana stance, it was still too advanced for me. What I needed to do first was actually to circulate my blood, or rather my qi and blood, according to the method of circulating force. The circulation of qi and blood should first be driven by breathing. Ziyue analyzed calmly. He had a deep impression of the force transmitted through the air, but it was someone else's force after all. He was only familiar with the way it was operated, but it was extremely difficult for him to cultivate it himself. Therefore, according to his understanding, he divided the Diana stance into 3 steps. First, it was to control the rhythm of breathing. Second, it was to master the way and direction of blood flow. Third, it was to integrate everything and cultivate force. So, Ziyue stood in the Diana stance, thinking carefully about the rhythm of the vibrations of the force. Then, according to this rhythm, he began to adjust his breathing, hoping to be able to match the vibrations. Inhale, inhale. After an unknown amount of time, at a certain moment, Ziyue's breathing finally matched the vibrations of the force in his memory. The air that he breathed gradually moved the blood in his body, vibrating along with it, and finally circulating through his entire body. Therefore, his body gradually produced a trace of heat, and very quickly, his entire body became warm. Even the pain in his shoulder was alleviated because of this. Even the soreness from when he stood in the stance was greatly reduced at this moment. This is the feeling. Ziyue's eyes lit up. The Diana stance that was originally only supposed to last 3 to 5 minutes. He stood for a full 20 minutes before he could no longer hold on and stopped. Name: Ziyue. Strength 0. 55 cannot be increased. Speed 0. 53 cannot be increased. Physique 0. 57 cannot be increased. Martial arts. Diana stance, uninitiated, cannot be increased. Spiritual energy 795 in just a short 20 minutes of standing in the stance. My physique, strength, and speed have all increased once again. I believe that as long as I continue to practice, in a few days, I will be able to truly initiate the Diana stance. Ziyue's confidence was greatly boosted. One must know that previously, with the help of Hong Gang's force transfer, his physique and strength had only slightly increased. Now that he was standing in the stance, his physique had increased by 0.05, his strength by 0.04, and even his speed had increased by 0.02. This improvement was not small. In order to initiate the Diana stance, one needs to remain still while standing in the stance and perspire to form water droplets. Although I can't do this now, I can already do it when my body is emitting heat and my entire body is warm. To truly initiate the Diana stance, all that's left is grinding. Ziyue's mind was calm, and his eyes were filled with joy. Even if he did not know how long it would take for him to initiate the Diana stance, he was still a chores apprentice. Soon, there would be all sorts of complicated tasks for him, and his training time would naturally be greatly reduced. But he understood that he was already on the right path. He did not need to endure the pain of the forced transfer to reach the Diana stance again, and he would be able to initiate the Diana stance. And once he had initiated the Diana stance, he would be able to borrow the power of his spiritual energy to directly increase his strength. Small success, or even large success, would not be far away. In the following period of time, Ziyue would rest when he was tired, and once he felt better, he would start practicing the Diana stance again. As time passed, the time he spent practicing the Diana stance also began to lengthen. The longest time he did it was a full half an hour. Mount Ziyue, Mr. Qian should be looking for us regarding the allocation of chores apprentices. Zhang Guai found Ziyue when the sun was setting in the distance, and the sunset glow illuminated the sky. He spoke with a serious expression. Then let's go over. Ziyue's heart tightened, and he hurriedly left the training field with Zhang Guai. Mr. Qian, Ziyue and Zhang Guai arrived at Qianming's courtyard. You guys are here. Qianming nodded at the two of them and said, Originally, This branch residence was lacking people, and I also wanted you guys to stay here. But someone said that they did not want to see you guys here. So, I can only send you guys out." As he spoke, Qianming shrugged with a helpless expression. "Who?" Zhang Wei asked angrily. Ziyue frowned, but did not say anything. "I said yesterday that you guys offended someone, and it seems that I was right." Qianming smiled, and the scar on his face appeared even more distorted. "If you guys have any connections, I can help you guys out. You will have more opportunities if you stay in the branch, right? If you are lucky, you might be favored by some big shot, and you might even have the chance to soar." Qianming continued to guide them. The Uncle Ming from our village is the head of the Qing River Pier." Zhang Guai's eyes lit up as he hurriedly said. "Then that's easy." Qianming clapped his hands and said, "As long as you guys take out 5 taels of silver and use your Uncle Ming's name and my guarantee, I can let you guys stay in the branch." Chapter 12. 5 taels of silver. Zhang Gui glared. Not to mention 5 taels of silver. He didn't even have 5 copper coins on him. When he bought the black paper ointment at the clinic, it was Ziyue who paid for it. "No, 1 tael of silver is fine, but you can only work in the branch's match room, kitchen, and even the laundry room." Qianming seemed to be in a difficult position as he frowned and said, "No need. We don't have any money on us. Mr. Qian, you can arrange it however you want. There's no need to be in a difficult position." Ziyue shook his head and said, "That's quite a pity. If you have connections, you have to borrow them." Qianming sighed regretfully. Seeing that they were really unwilling to spend money on this, he could only say, "In that case, I'll distribute it to you. Zhang Gui, you'll go to the Jade Moonflower Boat. This is a good job among the miscellaneous jobs. As for Ziyue, you'll go to the Pearl Restaurant. Go back and pack up. I'll send someone to send you there later." "Thank you, Mr. Qian." Ziyue thanked him and walked out with Zhang Gui. "Mount Ziyue, this time we're going to be separated. We originally had the chance to stay in the branch, but it must be because of that Wang Jian that we became miscellaneous jobs." Zhang Gui was a little reluctant at first, but then he gnashed his teeth. "Do you really think that someone deliberately made things difficult for us?" Ziyue sneered. Yesterday, he learned from the other miscellaneous jobs apprentices that Qianming's tone was kind, but he was greedy for money. Almost every one of the miscellaneous jobs apprentices who stayed in the branch spent money to stay. Although he wasn't sure if someone really told them to leave. Maybe not. They were just nobodies and no one would care about their thoughts. But Qianming was definitely profiting from this. "You're saying that Mr. Qian," Zhang Gui's expression changed. "I don't know. These aren't things we should be thinking about now. What happens next, we can only rely on ourselves," Ziyue said as he entered the small room they had stayed in before. He didn't have many things to pack. 2 sets of clothes and the book he bought in the morning were all wrapped up in a cloth bag. Not long after they finished packing up, a young man walked in and said, "You two should be the chores apprentices assigned this time, Zhang Gui and Ziyue. Come with me, I'll take you there." The 2 of them quickly got up, carried their luggage, and followed the young man out. The first place they went was the Jade Moonflower Boat along the shore of the Qing River. It was only now that Ziyue and Li Wuyo realized that the so-called Jade Moonflower Boat was actually a legendary brothel. On a nearly 20-meter-long flower boat, there was a pavilion and a small pavilion. There were also some vague figures of beautiful women. This senior brother Liu, named Liu Huaxing, handed Zhang Gui over to a 30-year-old old crow. Then, he got off the flower boat with Ziyue. "Our Radiant Sun Gang has countless businesses in Clear River Town. The Clear River Pier, the Jade Moonflower Boat, the Pearl Restaurant, the Clear River Casino, the Sky Scorpion Medicine Hall, the Wolfhorn Mine. Once you join our Radiant Sun Gang, even the lowest level of apprentice chores will not have to worry about food and drink. Although you're not in the branch, it's not impossible for you to earn a share of the family business. You have to know that the Flower Lady of the Jade Moonflower Boat and old Mr. Ho of the Pearl Restaurant also started as chores apprentices. Now, in terms of status, they're not inferior to some of the stewards in the branch." Senior brother Liu said with some emotion. "Old Mr. Ho is?" Ziyue asked hurriedly. The Pearl restaurant was opened under his management. It's one of the best restaurants in Chinatown. As they spoke, a tall restaurant appeared in front of them. Senior brother Liu led Ziyue in with familiarity. Ziyue sized up the restaurant. The entire restaurant had 2 floors. The hall on the first floor was filled with tables and chairs, while the second floor was filled with elegant rooms. It was dinner time, and the restaurant was filled with customers. 3 or 4 waiters were walking up and down with dishes in their hands and towels on their backs. Manager Lee, this is the chores apprentice assigned by the gang. You can make the arrangements. Senior brother Liu found the restaurant manager beside the counter and said with a smile, Ergu, bring him around to familiarize himself with the place. We'll start by serving the dishes. Manager Lee's eyes lit up when he saw this. He called out, and a young man who was only a few years older than Ziyue ran over. Hello, I'm Lee Ergu. Follow me. Ergu looked at Ziyue and said with a grin, I'm Ziyue. Ziyue quickly introduced himself. I'll bring you to put your things down first. You'll be in the same room as me in the future. Coincidentally, I have an empty bed. This is the kitchen. We usually work here most of the time. The living quarters are in the backyard. Here it is. You can put your things there first. When you work here, you have to wear the same clothes as me. You definitely don't have it now. Wear mine first. Although it's a little big, it'll be fine. Lee Ergu was very enthusiastic about Ziyue. He couldn't stop talking. You're new here, so you're definitely not familiar with this place. Just follow me. Manager Lee is a good person. As long as you don't slack off, he usually doesn't care about us. By the way, you must be curious about our salary. 150 coins a month. It's not a small amount. We provide food and accommodation. We don't usually buy anything. The money we save can be sent home. Lee Ergu's face was full of excitement. He quickly brought Ziyue back to the restaurant from the backyard. Therefore, Ziyue spent his first day in the Pearl restaurant serving dishes and cleaning the tables. Early in the morning of the second day, the tired Ziyue was woken up by Lee Ergu again. He started a busy day. He cleaned the tables, washed the vegetables, chopped the firewood, and did all kinds of trivial things. After 3 full days, he finally adapted. For Ziyue, the environment of the Pearl restaurant was pretty good. Whether it was Manager Lee or the head chef, Master Zhang, they weren't too harsh people. There were some leftover dishes, so they were not stingy to let the servants have a taste. As for the old Mr. Ho that senior brother Liu mentioned before, Ziyue also learned that old Mr. Ho rarely came to the restaurant. Only at the end or beginning of each month, he would come to collect the bill and take away a month's income. Ziyue actually didn't care about working. He wasn't a spoiled person. In his previous life, when he was studying, he did odd jobs and was ordered around by a harsh boss. However, there were many chores in the restaurant, so he didn't have much time to practice martial arts. This made him feel helpless. He had no choice but to take some time out every day to practice martial arts. Occasionally, he would take the book illustration and learn words according to the pictures. In a short time, he already knew more than 100 words. When he encountered some words that he couldn't recognize, he would boldly ask Manager Lee. Occasionally, he would get an answer. Chapter 13. Huff, huff, Ziyue stood in the room. Between his breaths, there was a unique rhythm that affected the blood in his body, making it flow faster. At this time, if someone were to come close to listen, they would even be able to hear the faint sound of blood flowing from his body. Suddenly, Ziyue's body tensed up. On the white skin of his hands, the blood vessels were exposed, pulsing with a unique force. Immediately after, streams of extremely fine sweat began to spread out. It gathered bit by bit, gradually condensing into droplets of sweat that looked like water droplets. The Diana stance. When standing still, sweat drips out of the body and forms droplets. This is the sign of the Diana stance. I've succeeded. I've learned the Diana stance. Ziyue was agitated. His breathing immediately became erratic, and he left his stance. But he did not care about this at all. In his heart, there was only joy and anticipation. Name, Ziyue strength, 0, 62, cannot be improved. Speed, 0. 59. Cannot be improved. Vitality. 0. 67. Cannot be improved. Martial arts. Dhyana stance can be improved. Spirit energy. 795". I've learned the Dhyana stance. My strength, speed, and vitality have all increased by a lot. Most importantly, the Dhyana stance behind the Dhyana stance can be improved. Ziyue took a deep breath and calmed down after a while. 5 days to learn the Dhyana stance. Compared to the other students in the Scorching Sun gang, this speed should be considered fast. But now I'll be even faster. Ziyue was very clear about his own situation. If not for the many odd jobs he had to do in the Pearl restaurant, he could have learned the Dhyana stance 2 or 3 days ago. If he really calculated, he could have done it in 2 days. Of course, he did not care about this as much as he thought. Even if there were people who learned the Dhyana stance faster than him, he did not deny that there were people who were geniuses. But he believed that there was definitely no one who could reach the Dhyana stance level faster than him. The only thing that he felt was a pity was that he was directly assigned as a miscellaneous student. He lost the opportunity to become an inner disciple. Thinking of Zhang Bo and Wang Jian, who had caused all this, Ziyue took a deep breath and calmed down. Consume 200 points of soul energy to upgrade the meditative stance to small success. Upgrade. Ziyue chose to upgrade without any hesitation. Buzz. Ziyue's vision blurred for a moment. Then, he felt his body heat up. It was as if he had gone through countless hardships in that instant. His understanding and cultivation of the Dhyana stance had reached an astonishing level. This kind of memory and power did not appear out of thin air. In fact, he was very clear about the various changes and details related to the cultivation of the Dhyana stance. He could even clearly feel the strength of his physical body. He was merely relying on the power of his soul to accelerate the process of cultivation. Soul energy was equivalent to saving him the time needed to cultivate step by step. Feeling his abundant strength, Ziyue had an intuition that his strength had definitely improved greatly compared to before. In fact, with the addition of his soul power and the initiation of the Dhyana stance, even though he still looked like an 8-year-old child, his strength was no weaker than a 12-year-old child's. However, at this moment, he felt that even if his strength was not comparable to an adult's, it was not far off. Name: U.S. strength 0, 82, unable to increase. Speed 0, 75, not upgradable. Physique 0, 87, not upgradable. Martial arts: small success in meditation stance, upgradable. Soul energy 595" as expected. The Dhyana stance is only slightly weaker than a normal person. Ziyue compared himself to before and found that his 3 basic attributes had indeed increased by a large margin. At this moment, he once again stood up in the Dhyana stance, and a weak force instantly grew. Although the force was weak, it was surprisingly tough, causing the blood in his body to circulate rapidly. As his blood splattered in all directions, it caused his body to involuntarily perform all sorts of actions. Small success in the Dhyana stance, the fixed stance to the living stance. Ziyue knew that because he had achieved small success in the Dhyana stance, the fixed stance had turned into a living stance. It was only now that he understood that the living stance was the movement and rotation of the blood. There was no need to deliberately practice any moves. Everything was driven by the blood, and everything was done according to one's heart. It could even sway unconsciously, or it could move up and down like a galloping horse, or it could twist and turn like a snake. Thinking back to the first time he saw someone practice the Dhyana stance and deliberately memorize the other person's living stance movements, he felt a little embarrassed now. Small success in the Dhyana stance has greatly increased my strength, and it has even allowed me to cultivate force. What about large success in the Dhyana stance? Ziyue looked at his own attribute panel, and his confidence increased greatly. Consume 400 soul energy to upgrade the Dhyana stance to large success. Upgrade. Once again, his consciousness was in a trance. Ziyue felt as if he had gone through countless days and nights of bitter training. He practiced the Diana stance over and over again tirelessly. His strength, his physique, as well as his physique, were strengthened again and again as he practiced over and over again. Finally, at a certain moment, he woke up. Instantly, a powerful feeling rose within him. It has surpassed the standard of an adult. My strength has definitely surpassed the standard of an adult. Ziyue's heart was filled with excitement. Until now, he still remembered the night when he encountered the brat a few days ago. That helplessness, that hesitation. It was also because of that incident that he had an incomparable thirst for strength and martial arts. Although his strength was not considered strong, at least compared to Uncle Ming, he was still very far away. Uncle Ming was a powerhouse who had undergone external forging and had begun internal forging. As for him, although he had cultivated the Diana stance to large success, he was still a long way away from internal forging. He could not even be considered at the level of external forging. He had only cultivated force. With force, he could explode with strength that surpassed that of an ordinary person. However, this was only a starting point. At least he was confident that if he encountered the brat again, he would not have any fear. With the force that he had cultivated, he could even counterattack and injure the brat, or even destroy its soul. Name: Ziyue Strength 1. 22 cannot be upgraded. Speed 1. 13 cannot be upgraded. Physique 1. 32 cannot be upgraded. Martial arts. Large success of the Diana stance. Cannot be upgraded. Spiritual energy. 195 inch after large success is large success. Unfortunately, I don't have enough spiritual energy now. If I had enough spiritual energy, I wonder what it would be like to cultivate the Diana stance to large success. Ziyue looked at the 195 points of spiritual energy left. He felt a little regretful, but more than that, he was looking forward to it. He was looking forward to having enough spiritual energy to upgrade the Diana stance again. He was also looking forward to learning new martial arts. Chores apprentices can go to the branch with small success of the Diana stance and learn a self-defense martial arts technique. Now that I have large success of the Diana stance. No, that's not right, Ziyue thought to himself, but quickly shook his head. Chapter 14. His improvement was too fast. The tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. Cultivating the meditation stance to the entry level in 5 days was still acceptable, but to cultivate the meditation stance to the small success level in 5 days, even to the large success level, anyone who heard this would feel that there was a problem. Other people took 2 to 3 months or even half a year to reach the small success level, but you did in one night. Other people took 3 to 5 years to reach the large success level, but you did in one night. It was fine if other people did not believe it, but once they did, with Ziyue's current small arms and legs, he would not be able to handle anyone who had designs on him. For my life, I can only keep a low profile. Even if I want to learn martial arts, I can't go to the branch for the time being. Ziyue sighed softly and shook his head helplessly. This was something that could not be helped. If he was strong enough, he would not have to worry too much. Right now, he was still very weak. Anyone who looked at him could make him tremble in fear. The previous logistics manager Zhang Bo, Senior Wang Jian, and Mr. Qian Ming, who arranged the distribution of apprentices. Did he not care about the unfair treatment they gave him? It was just that he knew that he was too weak and could not change anything. I don't have any opportunities in terms of martial arts, but I can think of some ways to improve my spirit energy. This time, he had used up a lot of spirit energy to cultivate the meditation stance to the large success level. He had less than 200 spirit energy left, so he naturally wanted to replenish it. Uncle Son, tomorrow you will go to the slaughterhouse to get meat. Can I go with you? In the kitchen, Ziyue asked a crippled middle-aged man while peeling a radish. Including Ziyue, there were a total of 10 people in the Pearl restaurant. Manager Li was in charge of the cashier and some store matters. The kitchen was Master Zhang's world. Master Zhang had 3 kitchen helpers. There was also Annie Sue, who did chores like washing clothes and picking up manure. Then there were the four who had the lowest status and would go wherever they were needed, like by Ziyue. At this time, Ziyue was asking one of the three chefs, Sun Nong, Uncle Sunday. Not only did Uncle Sun have good knife skills, he could cut tofu as thin as a strand of hair. It was said that he was once an official disciple of the sect, but because of a fight, he injured his leg and retired. In addition to cutting the meat in the kitchen, he was also responsible for selecting the freshly slaughtered pork and beef from the slaughterhouse every morning. Ziyue was using the opportunity of entering the slaughterhouse to obtain soul power. In this kitchen, it was not as if there was no time to slaughter chickens and ducks. However, when Ziyue approached in high spirits, he discovered that there was no increase in soul power at all. This caused him to grumble for a long time, until he slaughtered an old duck that he had raised for more than a year. Only then did his soul power increase. Only now did he understand that small creatures like chickens and ducks needed to be old enough to increase his soul power. The old hen that he had slaughtered at home had been raised for 3 whole years. You have to wake up early to go to the slaughterhouse. You have to set off before the sky is dark. You still have work to do. Don't tire yourself out. Sun Nong smiled and said, "It's okay. I can get up, and it won't affect the work here." Ziyue quickly said. Another advantage that Ziyue discovered after mastering the Diana stance was that he was full of energy. Waking up early was nothing to him. Moreover, for the sake of soul power, it was worth it to waste some sleep time. Another thing worth mentioning was that he had grown taller. Fortunately, the people in the restaurant were not familiar with him, so no one noticed anything unusual. "Since you can get up, I'll take you to see it." Sun Nong thought that Ziyue just wanted to see what the slaughterhouse was like, so he did not refuse. Before the next day, Ziyue had already gotten up, put on his clothes, and walked out of his room. The sun rose late in autumn, and it was still too early. According to the time in his previous life, it was only 3:30 a.m., so it was naturally dark outside. Fortunately, the moon was still bright, and Ziyue walked out of the backyard with the help of the moonlight. At this time, Uncle Sun had also gotten up. He took out a cart from the kitchen and placed 2 baskets on it. "Little you, you're up. I thought you were just joking yesterday." Sun Nong laughed and said, "I said I can get up, so I can get up," Ziyue said as he helped Uncle Sun push the cart out of the Pearl restaurant from the back door. The sky was dark and quiet, and even the moon seemed to be hiding. The entire street was dark, and there was not a single person in sight. Only the sound of Ziyue and Uncle Sun dragging the cart and the rolling of the wheels could be heard. "Uncle Sun, there's someone." Suddenly, Ziyue pulled Sun Nong's clothes and whispered. In a distant alley, a man dressed in black jumped down from a wall and walked away quickly. Soon, he disappeared into the night. "Don't worry about it." Sun Nong shook his head and said, "Those who can be wall visitors are strong people with some ability. Not only can we not do anything about it, we can't even make a sound. If we make a sound and make them unhappy, even if they kill you, no one will help you take revenge." Then the government won't do anything?" Ziyue said in surprise. However, he soon realized that his words were a little childish. The government? They are even more ruthless than these wall visitors. If the loss is small, once the government reports it, who wouldn't feel distressed about spending dozens of silvers? There might not even be a result. If the loss is large, the rich can also pay for people to recover it. As for killing people, which day in this town doesn't have people dying? Have you seen anyone who can be investigated? If they don't have a background, then they're dead. Sun Nong smiled coldly, and his footsteps involuntarily quickened. Although Ziyue was somewhat uncomfortable, he also knew that this was the way of the world, and no one could refute it. After less than half an hour, Ziyue followed Sun Nong to a somewhat remote place near the West Street. There was a faint smell of pig urine and a fishy smell coming from afar. Ziyue knew that they had arrived at the slaughterhouse. It was a somewhat dilapidated but very spacious house that was brightly lit. In more than 10 pig pens, there were fat white pigs waiting to be slaughtered. In the corner, there was also an old yellow cow that was lamenting. As Ziyue neared, A drop of cow's tear streaked across its eye. With a drip, it landed on the ground. Of course, other than these pigs waiting to be slaughtered, there were a few white pigs that had already been disemboweled. Ziyue seemed to have arrived at the right time. A pig was being grabbed onto the chopping board, and a strong man was holding a butcher's knife and stabbing it diagonally into the pig's throat. The tip of the knife pierced through the heart, and the pig violently trembled for a moment as blood gushed out. A youth who was already prepared dragged a basin and directly scooped up the pig's blood. Then, very quickly, the pig stopped struggling and died completely. Spirit power +7. Ziyue glanced at the status panel and was delighted. He had just arrived and already had a harvest. Chapter 15. Hey, brother Sun, you came at the right time. There's a big black pig here. It's about 300 pounds. I've already divided the meat. You can take any piece you want. And this yellow cow, look at how tough its meat is. If you want it, I'll start killing it immediately. It'll be done in half an hour. When a muscular man saw Sun Ning coming over, he hurriedly greeted him and said, I can have 50 pounds of black pig. Also, give me the head and trotters. As for the beef, I want 30 pounds. Sun Ning came here often and was familiar with the muscular man. He quickly gave his request. Okay. The muscular man happily replied and walked to the side of the old yellow cow. He called for a few helpers and moved it to the chopping board. The old yellow cow was very strong. It struggled with all its might, but the muscular man and the others were in this line of work. They were even stronger. Soon, the old yellow cow was pressed down and couldn't move at all. As if it knew the fate it was about to face, the old yellow bull wailed. Tears fell from its huge eyes and hit the chopping board, splashing small water droplets. Can't bear it? You'll get used to it sooner or later. Sun Ning said with a smile when he saw Ziyue looking away. Ziyue smiled bitterly. He could watch as the Ghost Head Stronghold's fourth chief, Wu Liang, was beheaded on the chopping board because he knew that he deserved it, even though he vomited a lot afterwards. But this old yellow cow's tearful appearance had indeed aroused his sympathy. However, he knew that such emotions were not good. So, in the end, he forced himself to open his eyes wide and watch as the old yellow cow was stabbed with a knife. Moo! The old yellow cow's roar went from loud to weak until it completely disappeared. Soul power +15. His soul power increased, but Ziyue didn't feel happy. In the following period of time, a few more big white pigs were placed on the chopping board. There were also people coming to buy meat. When Sun Ning finished collecting the restaurant's necessities and called Ziyue to leave, it was already half an hour later. Name, Ziyue strength, 1. 22, cannot be increased, speed, 1. 13, not upgradable, physique, 1. 32, cannot be upgraded, martial arts, great success in Diana stance, cannot be improved, soul energy, 229 my soul energy has increased by 34 points. This trip was worth it. Ziyue had already tidied up his gloomy mood. He was quite satisfied with this harvest. If he did it every day, he would gain 30 points of soul energy every day. He would only need 20 days to gather 800 points of soul energy and push the meditative stance to perfection. After enjoying the benefits of the great completion of the Diana stance, he naturally looked forward to the completion of the Diana stance. However, if he wanted to harvest spiritual energy every day, he still needed Uncle Sun's approval. Uncle Sun, let me help you push it. Ziyue saw that Uncle Sun was limping with one leg and was having a hard time going up the slope. He hurriedly gave him a push from behind. Under the effect of the force, the handcart immediately sped up a lot. You're pretty strong, aren't you? Sun Ning asked in surprise. On this slope, due to the inconvenience of his legs, he usually had a hard time pulling the handcart. However, it seemed to be very easy now. Naturally, he noticed that something was wrong. I was born with great strength. Normal adults can't compare to me, Ziyue said without any change in his expression. Oh, I really couldn't tell. I see that you're quite smart. It shouldn't be hard for you to reach the entry level of the Diana stance in a month. Why were you arranged to come to our restaurant? Could it be that you can't bear the pain of the strength transmission and don't want to practice? Sun Nong asked curiously. As for being born with great strength, although there were few people like that, it wasn't impossible. He didn't care. In this world where martial arts could be practiced, having great strength was not an advantage. I was arranged to be an apprentice just after I passed the test, Zeus said in a low voice. You? Sigh, our Bright Pearl restaurant is still better. We don't have so much scheming. Sun Nong frowned and roughly guessed something. He then sighed and said, Uncle Sun, can I still come to the slaughterhouse with you tomorrow? Zeus took advantage of the situation and asked, If you really want to come, I naturally have no reason to disagree. How about this? I'll tell Manager Lee later that you'll come with me to the slaughterhouse every morning to get meat. Without you, it'll be a bit difficult for me to walk up this slope. You can rest in the morning. Just come to the restaurant before 10 o'clock. Sun Ning nodded and took the opportunity to mention it. Is that okay? Zeus hesitated. Don't worry, old Sun still has some face. Sun Nong said generously. Although they were on the way back, the sky was still a bit dark. Only when looking into the distance could they see a trace of light. Zeus pushed the cart and walked in the direction of the Bright Pearl restaurant with Sun Nong. When he came to the place where he met the wall guest, he subconsciously looked around. Suddenly, he was shocked. There was someone. It was still the alley from before. At a corner of the roof, there was a person lying flat there. The person seemed to be observing something and did not notice that Zeus had seen him. Zeus quickly looked away, and then his heart skipped a beat. Not far in front of them, there was another person. He seemed to be squatting at the corner of the street, but his eyes were always wandering around the alley, the front of the main street, and the building not far away. Did he see me? Zeus was shocked and tried to pretend that he did not see anything. The wheels of the flatbed cart turned and made a rumbling sound. At this moment, time seemed to be extremely long. When passing by the building's signboard, Zeus pretended to glance up inadvertently. Lee's Pawn Hall. Zeus could recognize many words now. He guessed and soon recognized the signboard's name. Why does it feel a little familiar? Zeus muttered in his heart. When he noticed that he was close to the person who was squatting before, his heart tightened and he did not dare to think more. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, the other person seemed to be looking at them carefully. That kind of gaze seemed to have a kind of intimidating aura, which made him uncomfortable. Fortunately, until they left, the other person did not do anything else. Hurry up. After leaving the street, Sun Nong suddenly whispered. Zeus was stunned. Only then did he notice that the other person's face was a little pale and his forehead was faintly sweating. He immediately knew that Uncle Sun might not have found the person hiding on the roof, but the one squatting at the corner of the street definitely gave him a lot of pressure. Uncle Sun, just now. Zeus hesitated for a moment and asked. Don't ask. That person has a murderous aura. He is not an ordinary person. It will not do you any good to know. Sun Nong whispered. Zeus was shocked and quickly nodded. The other person squatting there obviously had a purpose. But even if they knew, what could they do? It was the wisest thing not to provoke him. Chapter 16. After Zeus and the others left, the man who was squatting there took a few quick steps and quickly entered the alley from the corner. With a slight jump, he directly jumped onto the 3-meter-high roof. His movements were light and silent, which showed that he had excellent lightness skills. The man on the roof was shocked. When he saw the newcomers, he relaxed and said in a low voice, What happened? 2 people passed by just now. I noticed. They are the waiters of the Pearl restaurant. They shouldn't have seen me. Zeus and the others were wearing the restaurant's uniform, so it was easy to recognize them. That kid looked in your direction. I'm not sure if he saw you. He shouldn't have. It's almost dawn. I'm almost done with my investigation. Inform Little Six that we're leaving. Okay. The 2 nodded slightly. With a flip of their bodies, they directly jumped down from the roof and quickly left. Lee's Hall of Honor. I must have heard of this shop somewhere. While he was working, Zeus began to recall the name of the signboard he saw before. Even though he knew that the other party's target was Lee's Hall of Honor, he didn't want to provoke them, let alone warn them. because he would be in danger of being smashed into pieces if he wasn't careful. At this moment, he just subconsciously thought of the name and then couldn't help but think deeply about it. Right, it was the first day I came to Qinghe Town under the beheading platform. Ziyue hadn't been in Qinghe Town for a long time. After sorting through his memory, he quickly remembered where he had heard the name of this shop. Li's Hall of Honor. The Li family. The three heroes of the Li family. The fourth chief of the Ghost Head Stronghold, Iron Hand Wu Liang. Ziyue recalled the discussion he had heard and was suddenly shocked. He suddenly thought of a possibility. The two people he met early in the morning were very likely bandits from the Ghost Head Stronghold. Could it be that the Ghost Head Stronghold wants to take revenge on the Li family? Ziyue's face was slightly pale. He had long heard that the Ghost Head Stronghold was extremely vicious and vengeful. But he didn't expect that they would be so crazy as to plan to take action against the Li family in a town in the prosperous district. Of course, all of this was only his guess. Whether or not those two were really from the Ghost Head Stronghold, and whether or not they were truly here to avenge their fourth stronghold chief, Wu Liang, he was not completely confident. However, all the signs seemed to indicate that his guess was likely to be true. Tightening his mind, Ziyue decided to keep this speculation to himself. The day passed quickly, and night fell. It was the most prosperous time for the Bright Pearl restaurant. Not only was the kitchen in full swing, but Ziyue and the other servants of the restaurant were also very busy. It was not until nearly 8 o'clock in the evening that they had time to take turns to have dinner. Every day, when the Pearl restaurant was about to close for the day, they would arrange for a servant to stand in the hall. Although there were almost no new guests, there were still some people who drank and chatted until it was very late. They had to wait for someone to greet them at all times, either to bring wine or to fill small plates with cold dishes. Although he didn't need to be too busy, he still had to wait by the side. Today, it was Ziyue's turn. At this time, he was standing in a corner of the restaurant board. Not far from him, there was a table of people drinking and chatting. They were the last table of guests in the restaurant. Judging from the situation, they would drink until late at night before they left. The board Ziyue was about to take out the picture and text analysis to learn a few more words when he was suddenly attracted by their conversation. I heard that the Tang residence is haunted. Which Tang residence? Who else could it be? The Tang residence of Tang Liansan of the Tai martial arts school. That can't be right. Tang Liansan is a martial artist at the peak of outer forging. His qi and blood are vigorous. What kind of ghost would dare to cause trouble at his residence? Wind from an empty cave may not be without cause. Ordinary ghosts might not dare to approach. But what about malicious ghosts? If it wasn't for the fact that he can't deal with it, how could the news spread? I heard that 2 of his maidservants had their essence sucked out and died. Recently, it seems that his daughter has been found, so he is anxious. I heard that he has already sent someone to Wudong Mountain to invite the 5th channel head. The 5th channel head is a person who is proficient in immortal spells. He is best at dealing with ghosts and other things. With his help, it seems that the Tang residence's disaster will be resolved soon. Isn't that so? Come, let's continue drinking. Bai Ziyue furrowed his brows. This was the first time he had heard of a series of strange incidents related to ghosts since he had personally encountered the little ghost. He had thought that Qinghe Town was prosperous and crowded, so there should be no space for ghosts to live. It seemed that he was just ignorant. Many things were hidden in the dark. Encountering ghosts was not auspicious, so it was normal that it was rare for them to appear. However, what is the 5th channel head and immortal spells? Ziyue suddenly had a strong interest in the 5th channel head, or more accurately, immortal spells. What is the difference between martial arts and immortal spells? Ziyue frowned. This world was indeed more exciting and mysterious than he had imagined. Although he had been busy until midnight the day before he could sleep, he still automatically woke up before 3 o'clock the next day to meet up with Uncle Sunday. The 3rd day, the 4th day, Ziyue thought that the Ghost Head Stronghold's revenge would come soon, and that something would definitely happen to the Li family's hall. He did not expect that these few days would be peaceful and nothing would happen. For this reason, he even deliberately passed by the Leaf family's hall during the day and found that the Leaf family's hall was open and operating normally. There was no sign of anything happening. It seems that I was overthinking. Zue frowned, but there was still a doubt in his heart. On the 5th day, Zue naturally got up and pulled out a handcart from the kitchen. He put down 2 baskets. At this time, Uncle Sun had just gotten up and praised him. The 2 of them went out again. In the silent night, only the sound of the handcart's wheels could be heard. Perhaps it was because of the weather change, but dark clouds covered the entire sky and blocked the moon. As far as the eyes could see, it was particularly dark. Zue and Sun Gnome were familiar with the road. Although it was dark, they could still see clearly within 3 to 5 meters. It did not affect their walking, so they walked forward step by step. Those 2 people, just as Zue and Uncle Sun Gnome walked into a street, 2 figures slowly appeared from the corner of the street. The second bandit chief hasn't made a move yet. Let him go first. One of them said softly. The other person nodded. If the second bandit chief had not made a move by the time the 2 of them passed, then they were naturally lucky and avoided disaster. If the second bandit chief made a move during this time, then they could only blame it on their bad luck. If they killed the wrong person, they would not let them go. Then, the 2 of them hid in the darkness again. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream came from a nearby house. And that house was the backyard of the Leaf family's hall. Then, a cold voice filled with killing intent rang out. Kill, leave no one alive. Chapter 17. Ghost Head Stockade. Zue's expression suddenly changed, and an endless sense of danger surged in him. Because of his previous guess, he was always on edge when he was walking on this road. After a few days of peace, he thought that the Ghost Head Stockade had given up, or that his previous guess was wrong. He never thought that he would meet them at this time. The Ghost Head Stockade really came to avenge their 4th chief. Uncle Sun. Zue was about to ask Uncle Sun how to deal with this, but he saw that the other party did not even greet him and ran away like a gust of wind in the direction he came from. At this time, he did not look like he was injured at all. His speed was very fast, and he disappeared into the night in the blink of an eye. This was the quickness of an experienced person. Once he saw that something was wrong, he immediately ran away. Zue cursed in his heart and quickly followed. With the success of the Diana stance, his body stats had increased greatly, and his speed was not slow either. But soon, Zue's expression changed. Without thinking, he turned around and ran into a small alley at the side. In front of him, there was suddenly the sound of martial artists fighting. It was obvious that although Sun Gnome ran very fast, the Ghost Head Stockade seemed to have people lying in ambush to prevent anyone from escaping. At this time, they directly acted and stopped him. Zue, who ran into the alley, was very pale, and his heart was very flustered. No, I can't run anymore. Who knows how many people from the Ghost Head Stockade are lying in ambush around here? Zue forced himself to calm down. He knew that the more flustered he was, the easier it was to make mistakes. Only by being calm could he find a solution to this predicament. Suddenly, Zue's eyes lit up. Previously, when he deliberately checked the Lidian Hall, he walked through this small alley and knew that there was a dog hole under the wall in front of him. The dog hole was very small, and an adult naturally could not pass through it. But he was now in the form of a child, so passing through the dog hole would not be a problem. In order to escape, he did not care about anything else. Soon, the dog hole appeared in front of him. Without any hesitation, Zue directly went in. Not good, it's blocked. Zue's face turned pale. He originally wanted to hide in the house through the dog hole. Unexpectedly, this dog hole seemed to lead to his kitchen. The chopped wood completely blocked the other side of the exit. In the midst of the chaos, a clear sound of footsteps could be heard at the entrance of the alley. Then, he gradually approached the alley. Zue was so nervous that he almost stopped breathing. Cold sweat dripped down his face. Divine Sword Lu Jiping, Diamond Body Wu Yong, Ghost Head Stronghold's second bandit chief, and third bandit chief are all here. Right at this moment, an extremely furious voice sounded out. The second young master of the Li clan captured the fourth bandit chief of the Ghost Head stronghold alive. How awe-inspiring. Today, I would like to see how awe-inspiring the Li clan, whose entire clan has been slaughtered, will be. An incomparably cold voice sounded. You want to kill my entire clan? Why don't you take a look at where you are? This voice sounded old, but it seemed to be filled with boundless confidence. Oh, I didn't expect that the old man of the Li family was also an expert. The voice from before seemed to be a little surprised, but a cold voice came out of its mouth. Kill. Let's end this quickly. Even if it was them, they did not dare to waste too much time fighting in Town. It was not that there were no experts in the town. Yang Zhengling, the governor of Town, and Lu Dong, the leader of the Scorching Sun Gang, the Heaven-Binding Hand, were all existences that they needed to be on guard against. Rumble. Energy surged, and the walls collapsed. The sounds of battle were extremely intense. From time to time, the sound of swords clashing could be heard. It sounded like steel hammers and was extremely ear-piercing. In the small alley, the footsteps gradually approached. Ziyue's breathing gradually weakened. With the great mastery of the Diana stance, his control over his own body had reached an astonishing level. He could control his breathing to a state where it was barely discernible. Of course, he naturally knew that instead of hoping that others would not discover him, it was better to be prepared to fight to the death. With his strength that was greater than that of an ordinary adult, and the energy that was born after the great mastery of the Diana stance, it was not impossible for him to kill with one strike. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, that figure is only 10 meters away from Ziyue. Suddenly, that person was horrified. He felt that the battle in the distance had begun to approach them. Sewer, I'll block them. You run first. An old voice sounded. Obviously, the Li family was no match for the well-prepared Ghost Head stronghold after all. None of you can escape. From the Ghost Head stronghold side, the cold voice sounded again. A dazzling sword light suddenly bloomed and nimbly enveloped the father and son of the Li family. The magical sword Lu Jiping, with one strike, could connect with the gods. Moreover, this strike was very unusual. There was sword energy bursting out from it. Inner Chi state. How is it possible? Old Master Li's panicked voice sounded. Then he showed a determined look and shouted, Go! Then he directly faced the sword light that was filled with endless killing intent. Not only that, but in order to prevent the third chief of the Ghost Head stronghold, Vajrabadi Wu Yong, from intercepting his son, he threw the battle saber in his hand and charged directly at Wu Yong. Humph! You can't escape. Lu Jiping snorted coldly and struck out with his palm. Under the effect of inner chi, even from 4 to 5 meters away, it had terrifying power. Li Su's back suddenly caved in, and he crashed into the wall like lightning. Rumble. The wall collapsed. Li Su spat out a mouthful of blood and rolled to his feet. At the entrance of the alley, Ziyue and that person were shocked at the same time. Li Su had rushed directly into the alley from the other side of the wall. Kill! The people of the Ghost Head stronghold were all desperados. Seeing this, they were not afraid at all. With long sabers in hand, they quickly rushed forward. The saber light was so dense that it seemed to be airtight. Dying! Although Li Su was injured, he was a true inner refinement expert. Coupled with his innate strength, eyesight, and speed, he was far superior to ordinary outer refinement experts. He stretched out his hand and accurately grabbed the opponent's long saber. With a burst of force, the long saber suddenly broke. Then, his body swayed, and the hand holding the broken saber quickly passed by. That person's head was directly split open, and he died. Although he had killed the enemy in an instant, Li Su did not dare to stop at all. His body was like lightning as he rushed out. After him, Super Swordsman Chun Jiping shouted. He threw away the dead body of Old Master Li and rushed out quickly. Diamond Body Wu Yong followed closely behind, his body quickly passing through the rooftops. It was not until the surroundings were quiet for a long time that Ziyue recovered from his daze. The fight between experts was too fast and too fierce. In a few moments, someone had died. He stayed at the entrance of the cave. Although he could not see clearly because of the sky and the angle, he saw the way Li Su broke the long saber with one hand. That was because the broken saber was lying quietly 3 meters away from him. Chapter 18. I can't stay here for long. Ziyue thought for a moment, and his heart tightened. This place was close to the center of the battle, and there would definitely be people coming to investigate. If it was the government or people from Qinghe Town, it would be fine. Although he would inevitably be caught in the whirlpool, at least he would be able to keep his life. But if it was the people from the Ghost Head stronghold, although the possibility was not high, because in the distance there were already sounds coming. Clearly, people from various forces were approaching, but he did not dare to take the risk. He only had one life, and he naturally had to control it in his own hands. Walking out of the cave, Ziyue first saw the Ghost Head stronghold bandits whose leader had been separated. Perhaps it was because he had seen too many slaughterhouses, but when he looked at the corpses now, he did not feel as disgusted as before. He carefully walked around, and a collapsed wall appeared in front of him. He knew that this wall had been broken by Li Su. Suddenly, he quickly walked forward and picked up a flat black package from the collapsed wall. From a feel of it, it seemed to be something like a book. Obviously, this was what Li Su had dropped when he was sent flying. Not daring to look at it now, Ziyue carefully put it inside his clothes and quickly left. Along the way, Ziyue was very careful. The slightest movement would make his heart jump. Fortunately, the journey was smooth, and Ziyue returned to the Bright Pearl restaurant. Little Yu. Just as he was about to enter, a voice suddenly sounded behind him. Ziyue quickly turned around and saw that the person who called him was Sun Nong's uncle's son, who had been with him before. Surprisingly, the other party had returned unscathed. But thinking of his running speed and his early experience in the Jianghu, it was clear that he was not weak to be able to escape from the Ghost Head stronghold bandits. However, his action of escaping alone at the critical moment made him feel cold. He also understood that in this world, other than himself, there was no one he could really rely on. Only by being strong could he face everything calmly. You plan to go back like this? Sun Nong looked at Ziyue and said, Say that you ran into the Ghost Head stronghold and escaped? That won't do. Once someone asks, trouble will come one after another. Then what should we do? Ziyue calmed down and understood that Sun Nong was right. The matter of the Li clan was incomparably important. It was like a whirlpool. Once one was involved, there was a chance that one would be sucked into it. His small arms and legs couldn't bear it all. Not to mention, he still had the bag that Li Jiu dropped in his arms. He did not know if the other party had escaped, but he did not want to hand over the thing in his arms so easily. Go back and get the meat from the slaughterhouse normally. If anyone asks, just say that you don't know. Sun Nong said directly. But over there, Ziyue hesitated. At this time, the people from the Ghost Head stronghold have already left. Everyone's attention is on the Li family's mansion. No one will pay attention to us. Sun Nong interrupted. Hearing this, Ziyue nodded and returned again with Sun Nong. On the way, Sun Nong did not ask Ziyue how he escaped, and Ziyue did not mention that the other party had left him behind to escape alone. The two of them were bored and soon returned to the place where they left the handcart. The Li clan's mansion was brightly lit. There were some constables and other officials going in and out. No one really paid attention to the two of them. Half an hour later than usual, Ziyue and Li Jiu returned from the slaughterhouse with the pork and beef. On the way, Sun Nong said in a low voice, I heard that you like to practice martial arts. Have you learned the basics of the Diana stance? Ziyue was stunned. He was usually very diligent in practicing martial arts. Everyone in the Pearl restaurant knew about it. With his talkative nature, some of the regular customers in the restaurant knew about it. Sometimes, they would even ask him a few questions when they caught him. What he was surprised about was why Sun Nong asked this question. Yes, just learned, Ziyue said calmly. When the Diana stance was mastered, the Diana stance would turn into a living stance. When the Diana stance was mastered, the living stance would turn into a Diana stance. Although the external appearance was the same as when one first learned, the internal was very different. It was mainly reflected in the word lock. It locked the skin outside the body so that the sweat would not come out. It locked the blood vessels in the body so that the blood would not break through the vessels. It locked the force in the body so that it would not dissipate, and it would be more solid and tenacious. Therefore, even though Ziyue was still practicing hard every day, no one noticed that he had mastered the dhyana stance. Of course, this was also related to the fact that he stayed in the house every time he practiced. It has only been 10 days since the transmission of force. If you were an outer disciple of the Scorching Sun Gang, this speed would be enough for you to become an inner disciple. What a pity. How about this? When you have mastered the dhyana stance, I will teach you a set of blade techniques. It will be a kind of compensation for you. Sun Nong sighed and said, "Thank you, Uncle Sunday." Ziyue's eyes lit up, and he thanked him repeatedly. Although he knew that this was a kind of compensation from Sun Nong due to his guilt, he was still very excited. From the beginning to the end, he had always been very eager to learn martial arts. Although the soul energy could speed up his practice, if there was no one to teach him martial arts, he would not be able to improve his strength. All right, Uncle Sun, I have often heard people say that external training is internal training. But what is external training and internal training? If I master the dhyana stance, will it be external training? Taking advantage of Sun Nong's interest, Ziyue quickly asked. The dhyana stance is only the most basic force training method. Even if you master it, it will not be external training, let alone minor mastery. External training is to train the body, muscles, bones, and skin. The force training in the dhyana stance is only the foundation of external training. As for internal training, it is still too far away for you. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Sun Nong said lightly. What are the outer forging cultivation methods? How can I practice them? Ziyue asked curiously. External training methods require you to activate your force and move like a mouse under your skin. Just like this, perhaps due to his guilt, he was not stingy with teaching Ziyue. In order to demonstrate, he even stretched out his arm. Ziyue looked over and saw that on the skin of Sun Nong's arm, a bump the size of half a finger suddenly bulged. Under Sun Nong's control, the bump moved back and forth, left and right. It really did look like a small mouse was moving around inside. Generally speaking, as long as you master the dhyana stance, you will be able to do this. Naturally, you will also be able to practice external training methods. Speaking up to this point, Sun Nong paused for a moment before continuing. A basic training method like the dhyana stance might not be everywhere, but it's not hard to learn. However, it was rare to see an external forging technique in the entire Qinghe town. For example, our Scorching Sun Gang's Vajralok Jade Tactics, Tai E Dojo's Iron Cloth Shirt, and Escort Leaders 6 and 7 Crisscrossing are all external training methods that can directly reach the peak of external training. As for those external training methods that can't directly reach the peak of external training, they're useless even if you learn them. Let's not talk about them. Chapter 19. Diamond Lock Jade Tactics, Iron Cloth Technique, 6, 7 Crisscrossing. He noted it down. This was going to be his way of leveling up, so he had to pay attention to it. Of course, although external training techniques are important and are the foundation of leveling up, martial techniques are just as important. In the Jianghu, if you don't train in martial techniques, being killed by people weaker than you is a very normal thing. Some of the more powerful ones can train their martial techniques to perfection and have extraordinary power. From there, they become famous in the Jianghu and have their own names. For example, our sect master Lu Dong has the reputation of heaven-binding hands outside. It is very famous. Sun Nong's face was full of respect. Even though his leg was injured and he was reduced to serving side dishes in the Pearl restaurant, his heart of the Jianghu had not died. He was still full of respect and yearning for the strong. Then the blade technique you want to teach me is a martial technique? Ziyue asked at the right time. That's right. When you reach small success in a meditative stance, I will teach you this blade technique. Sun Nong nodded and said with certainty. Ziyue was secretly looking forward to it, but he did not dare to directly show that he had reached large success in the meditative stance. He could only wait patiently. Then, when the time was right, he would announce that he had reached small success in the meditative stance and learned this martial technique. In the morning, because of the morning trip, he had his own time to rest. When he returned to his room, he first looked at his status panel. Name, US Strength, 1. 22, cannot be increased. Speed, 1. 13, cannot be increased. Vitality, 1. 32, cannot be increased. Martial arts, large success in the meditative stance, cannot be increased. Spirit energy, 672-inch. Although I was affected by the Leaf family in the morning and it was a little scary, it was not like I didn't gain anything. It could be considered a blessing in disguise. Ziyue was slightly relieved and comforted himself. After a few days of traveling to the slaughterhouse, his spirit energy had increased to about 400 points. The remaining spirit energy was contributed by the bandit from the Ghost Head stronghold. This had greatly shortened the time he needed to accumulate 800 points of spirit energy and upgrade his meditation stance to perfection. Of course, this might be the biggest reward, Ziyue thought to himself. First, he carefully looked around. After confirming that there was no one around, he took out a black package from inside his clothes. Just the outer layer of cloth was soft and smooth. It was obviously a good cloth. This made Ziyue look forward to the things inside even more. He opened the cloth bag, and 2 books appeared in front of him. Purple Chi Divine Visualization Technique, Volume 1 of the 100 Talisman Catalog. Ziyue read it carefully 3 times before he could recognize the words on it. His heart skipped a beat. It doesn't look like a martial arts manual. It looks more like Ziyue had some guesses. Ziyue was dumbfounded when he flipped open the Purple Chi Visualization Technique. He could only recognize half of the first page. As for the rest of the words, he had to guess what they were and what they meant. For the past few days, he had been learning words every day. He had almost finished learning all the words in the diagram analysis, but there were still many words that he could not recognize. With the amount of words he could read, it would be difficult for him to finish reading an entire article. However, even so, he was finally certain of his previous guesses. This Purple Chi Divine Visualization Technique was indeed an immortal cultivation technique. He flipped open the 100 Talisman Catalog again. Ziyue silently folded the 2 books and wrapped them in cloth again. Illiteracy was not scary. What was scary was having a cultivation technique in hand and being illiterate. Ziyue planned to study hard for the next period of time. Even if he couldn't achieve Wondrous Blossom, he definitely couldn't let such a secret manual appear in front of him. But he couldn't practice it because he didn't know enough words. These 2 books were definitely extremely precious. Ziyue carefully hid them. After confirming that Li Ergu would not discover them, he once again stood in the corner of the room, where he usually practiced his stance. I can't think about it anymore. Ziyue shook his head, but there was a wave of regret in his heart. With a secret manual in hand and a legendary cultivation technique at that, anyone would be tempted. Naturally, he was the same. However, even though he urgently wanted to understand the method and the Purple Chi Visualization Technique and practice it, he was also very clear that with his semi-literate state, he could not understand it completely. If he made a mistake, it would be very dangerous. Therefore, he very decisively sealed the 2 books. After a while, Ziyue regained his calmness, and his mind was calm. After mastering the Dhyana stance, one can move like a mouse under one's skin and practice external cultivation techniques. Now, I can be considered to have this qualification, but unfortunately, I don't have any external cultivation techniques. Ziyue stretched out his arm, and the force in his body surged. Immediately, a small bump appeared. Then, under his control, the bump wriggled back and forth, left and right, as if there was really a mouse scurrying under his skin. Previously, when Sun Nong demonstrated this ability, he had a feeling that he could also use it. Now that he tried it, it was indeed so. However, without an external cultivation technique. So what if he had the qualification to practice it? Expose his ability to master the Dhyana stance. And then learn the Diamond Lock Jade tactic from the Scorching Sun Gang? Almost as soon as this thought appeared, he extinguished it. He did not deny that there were geniuses in this world, but a genius who could master the dhyana stance in a few days. No one would believe it. Moreover, there were demons and ghosts in this world. If he was burned to death as a demon, that would be a real injustice. In his memory, in some of the stories and legends that he had heard, there had been such a thing. It was said that a newborn child could crawl in half a month, walk in March, and speak in May. He was directly treated as a demon by the local villagers and burned to death. He did not want to become the main character of such a story. It was too depressing. I can only think of other ways. Ziyue thought of the Iron Shirt of the Iron Shirt Martial Arts School. The martial arts school was a relatively open place, and it was not impossible to learn this external cultivation technique. As for the 6-7 horizontal movement of the escort leader, it should be a unique external cultivation technique of the Wu family, and it was relatively difficult to learn. Of course, he did not lack patience. He was still young, and his starting point was much faster than others. He had plenty of time. At noon, the Pearl restaurant was as busy as usual. But today, almost all the guests were talking about the annihilation of the Leaf family. What a pity for the Leaf family. They had a chance to prosper and become a local noble family. Sai, who told them to offend the Ghost Head village. Even the government's several attempts to encircle them failed, and the second son of the Leaf family recklessly provoked them. When I heard that Li Su forced the Ghost Head village's fourth chief into prison, I knew that his family would face such a disaster sooner or later. Hey, bragging. I wonder who was the one who kept flattering Li Su. He said that the Leaf family had 3 heroes and would definitely prosper. Chapter 20. We only underestimated the vengeful heart of the Ghost Head stronghold. Who knew that they would be so crazy? Fortunately, the eldest son, Li Qing, is working in the county town, and the third son, Li Hun, is also preparing for the provincial examination. Otherwise, the Li family would have been wiped out. The first person did not speak, but another person continued the conversation. The most pitiful one is actually the second son, Li Su. I heard that he was only 300 meters away from the yamen, but was still caught and killed. Li Su still died in the end. Zua lowered his head silently. He did not know whether he should rejoice or feel sad. He knew that he owed Li Su a debt of gratitude. Regardless of whether Li Su did it intentionally or not, Wu Liang's beheading, the Ghost Head stronghold bandit that Li Su killed in the morning, and the Purple Chi Divine Observation Technique, and the 100 Talisman Compendium in his hands were all related to Li Su, and Li Su had benefited from them. Silently remembering this in his heart, Ziyue once again fell into a busy state after a call to arms. In the following period of time, everything seemed to be peaceful. The government did not launch an attack on the Ghost Head stronghold because of the massacre. There were only many wanted posters of the second chief of the Ghost Head stronghold, Lu Zhiping, and the third chief of the Ghost Head stronghold, Wu Yong, on the streets and alleys. Ziyue naturally saw the crew drawings. Even if Li Su really stood in front of him, it would be difficult to recognize him from the drawings. It was almost useless. As for the rewards of 800 and 500 taels of silver, no matter how tempting they were, not many people dared to make a move. The example of the Li family was still fresh in his mind. Not to mention, other than the second and third chief of the Ghost Head stronghold, there was still the mysterious head chief. During this period of time, the eldest son of the Li family, Li Qing, returned from the county town. After hastily settling his affairs, he sold off all the properties of the Li family in Qingatown. It seemed that he had no plans to take revenge and moved his family to the county town. Regarding this, those who were paying attention naturally discussed it. Ziyue also understood it through these discussions. Unknowingly, half a month had already passed since the incident with the Li family. In half a month, Ziyue had spent another 151, and his literacy program had progressed quite smoothly. Now, he was able to read an article smoothly without feeling that it was obscure. He could also combine some of the scriptures with the knowledge of his previous life and understand them thoroughly. This could be considered to have solved the problem of literacy. Furthermore, the dhyana stance that he cultivated had finally reached the level of perfection after he gathered 800 points of soul energy. Name: ZUS Strength 183, not upgradable. Speed 175, not upgradable. Physique 192, not upgradable. Martial arts: perfect meditation stance, cannot be improved. Soul energy 337. The perfect level of the dhyana stance had not only greatly increased his attributes, but more importantly, it had also transformed the force in his body. Zue pinched a piece of paper vertically in his hand, while his other hand slowly stretched out horizontally. 10 centimeters away from the paper, he did not move, and the force in his body suddenly activated. Puff! The paper tore apart and fell to the ground. Force out of the body can tear the paper apart. This was the characteristic of the perfect level of the dhyana stance. The force that was cultivated could be released from the body, forming a surge of force. This surge of force was like the steam that rose from boiling water the moment the lid was opened. It was just that it was more condensed and formed into a beam, reaching the point where it could hurt people. This was actually the level of the instructors of the Scorching Sun Gang. They had practiced martial arts for many years. Even if they did not deliberately cultivate the dhyana stance, it was enough to push it to the perfect level. Slowly calming his breathing, Zue withdrew his force. Even if the dhyana stance was perfect, he still took time out every day to cultivate. It was not to improve, but because the perfect level of the dhyana stance could not be improved. It was all because he had no other martial arts to cultivate. However, today was a little different. Zue scanned his surroundings. After confirming that there was no one around, he took out a cloth bag from under his bed. Opening the cloth bag, the purple Chi Divine visualization technique and the 100 Talisman catalog immediately appeared before his eyes. He already knew that the purple Chi Divine visualization technique was an immortal cultivation technique, while the 100 Talisman catalog was a talisman technique that explained talismans and talisman crafting. Both books could be cultivated at the same time. However, after considering everything, Zue only took out the purple Chi Divine visualization technique and put the 100 Talisman catalog back. Talisman crafting required materials and talisman brushes. Although there was no cultivation realm requirement, ordinary people could craft them. However, he had no money. Regardless of whether it was crafting talisman paper or buying talisman brushes, they all required money and cost a lot. With his net worth of only a few dozen copper coins, he could not afford them at all. As such, the purple Chi Divine visualization technique was naturally more suitable. Flipping open the purple Chi Divine visualization technique, Zue began to carefully study it for the first time. This time, even if there were one or two words that he was not familiar with, he was able to combine them and understand the meaning. The cultivation of the immortal Tao is to gather Qi, consume dew, and nourish the spirit to achieve a clean body, full spirit, and harmonious Qi. Only then can the first strand of spirit Qi be born in the body. The birth of spirit Qi is the beginning of the path of cultivation. The opening of the book made Zue's heart tremble. Following that, the book began to introduce how to gather Qi, consume dew, nourish the spirit, and how to be considered clean body, full spirit, and harmonious step by step. It was complicated and cumbersome. However, just as Zue began to consider how to follow the steps to cultivate, the tip of the pen in the book changed and wrote, "The above is the cultivation method of the ancient immortals." In modern cultivation, the predecessors removed most of the cumbersome and useless cultivation methods and focused on the art of gathering Qi. When one's Qi is full and one's spirit is full, one's body will naturally be clean, full spirit, and harmonious, and spiritual Qi will be born. Zue blinked and felt that it was funny, but he also heaved a sigh of relief. Because if he cultivated according to the book's introduction of gathering Qi, consuming dew, and nourishing the spirit, it would really be difficult for him to do it with his current status and conditions. Following that, The book introduced the true cultivation method of the purple chi divine observation technique. After reading the entire book, Ziyue heaved a long sigh of relief and then immersed himself in the book again. After reading it 3 times and confirming that he did not miss anything, he closed the book. The cultivation of the purple chi divine observation technique was mainly about gathering the purple chi of the morning sun and using it to nourish the body. When the body was nourished to a certain extent, the body would be able to produce the first strand of spirit chi. It was simple, but also complicated. The main difficulty was that when absorbing the purple chi of the morning sun, one could not be greedy and advance prematurely. One had to control it to a certain extent. Once one was about to lose control, there would be the danger of being burned by the yang fire. However, no matter how difficult it is, I have to try. Ziyue had already made up his mind. Name: Ziyue Strength 1, 83, cannot be improved. Speed 1, 75, cannot be improved. Physique 1, 92, cannot be improved. Martial arts. Perfect meditation stance, cannot be improved. Immortal arts. Purple chi divine observation technique, cannot be improved. Spiritual energy. 337. Seeing that the purple chi divine observation technique was indeed recorded on the attribute panel, Ziyue was even more determined. Chapter 21. Ziyue and Sun Gnome couldn't wait to leave after delivering the meat back to the Bright Pearl restaurant. Ziyue jogged all the way to the southeast of Qinghe Town. A 6-meter wide river divided Qinghe Town into 2 areas. On the other side of the river was the West Street and the North Street. It was a bustling commercial area with government officials, wealthy families, and all sorts of powers gathered there. On the other hand, on the southeast side was the slum of Qinghe Town. Just by looking at the houses on both sides, one could clearly feel the difference. It was like 2 different worlds. The dilapidated wooden houses were tightly connected. The streets and alleys were also very narrow. They could only allow 3 people to walk side by side. After crossing the bridge, Ziyue could only see darkness in front of him under the cover of the densely packed houses, and the sun hadn't risen yet. On the uneven road, Ziyue walked forward step by step, turning left and right. Soon, he arrived at the foot of a tall mountain. There was a long stone staircase that extended upwards. This was the heavy Inkstone Mountain. The mountain looked like an inkstone, because there was an earth god temple on the mountain. Although no one took care of it, people would go there and burn incense during festivals. Therefore, this stone path was built. Without hesitation, Ziyue quickly climbed up. By Ziyue's physique and strength were almost twice that of an ordinary person's after the Diana stance was upgraded to perfection. Ordinary people might need to take a break to climb the 500-meter tall mountain, but Bai Ziyue did it in one go and climbed it in only 5 minutes. Standing on a smooth, large rock, Ziyue looked to the east. Behind the black mountains in the distance, the sky was only slightly white. The sun had not risen yet. I finally made it. Ziyue let out a long sigh and gradually calmed himself down. This time, Bai Ziyue had ascended the heavy Inkstone Mountain in order to cultivate the purple chi divine observation technique. The purple chi divine observation technique was to absorb the purple chi of the rising sun into the body and turn it into nourishment. Only at the moment when the sun rose would the purple chi of the morning sun diffuse. For the sake of cultivation, he had no choice but to climb this heavy Inkstone Mountain. To cultivate the purple chi visualization technique, the most important thing is to receive the purple chi. When the purple chi comes from the east, if one doesn't know how to receive it and use it, how can one succeed in cultivating it? Therefore, before the sun rises, one must first visualize the purple chi guidance diagram. Only then can one truly receive the purple chi of the rising sun and absorb it into one's body. Ziyue calmed himself down and slowly adjusted his breathing. He had long since memorized the purple chi guidance diagram and knew it by heart. Bai Ziyue compared it to his memories and visualized the purple chi guidance diagram. Lines of complicated yet orderly patterns gradually took shape in his mind. Ziyue didn't know how others were doing when they visualized the purple chi guidance diagram, but he was happy that he succeeded in one try. As a matter of fact, immortal cultivation was all about innate talent. The most important thing was actually the strength of one's soul. On the surface, it showed that one's willpower was strong and one's memory was extraordinary. Using the purple chi guidance diagram as an example, if one's memory and willpower weren't strong enough, how could the visualization take shape? It was easy to visualize each stroke, but the entire purple chi guidance diagram had a total of 36 strokes. How could one succeed in one try? Ziyue was able to succeed in one try because his willpower was stronger than the average person's and because he had the talent for cultivation. Naturally, it was also because of the perfection of the dhyana stance, the increase in his constitution, and the nourishment of his chi and blood. Finally, the horizon lit up. A beam of golden light spilled from the horizon and spread rapidly. The world was bright, and all living things seemed to have awakened at this moment. Faintly, one could even hear the crowing of roosters. Just as that beam of golden light spilled onto Ziyue's body, Ziyue's mind trembled. The purple chi guidance diagram in his mind immediately lit up. Strands of gentle purple chi of the rising sun gradually entrenched themselves on his body. Then, through the purple chi guidance diagram, it spilled directly onto his body. A kind of extreme warmth, as if he had returned to his mother's womb, caused him to lose focus for a moment. Fortunately, he quickly woke up and stabilized the purple chi guidance diagram that was about to deform. That was why he didn't break the guidance of the purple chi. Strands of purple chi of the rising sun continuously flowed into Ziyue's body, cleansing his body and mind. It actually had the effect of cleansing his meridians, causing some impurities to be gradually expelled from the surface of his body. It is indeed starting to work. Presumably, when all the impurities in my body are completely expelled, my body will enter a state of cleansing. As for my spirit, chi, when he was guiding the purple chi of the rising sun, Ziyue could still be distracted. He thought that it was because the purple chi was cleansing his body and mind while also repairing and strengthening his spirit, making his spiritual power more abundant. Time passed slowly, and the sun gradually rose. Just as the sun was about to be completely exposed, oh no! Ziyue's expression suddenly changed. At this moment, he felt as if his entire body was being burned by a sea of fire, and thunder was ringing in his ears. His entire body was in extreme pain. When the sun rose, the purple chi of the rising sun had already dissipated. At this moment, the sky was filled with the fire chi of the sun. The fire chi of the sun could burn everything. It was Ziyue's first time cultivating. He was too greedy and didn't know the time. When the purple chi of the rising sun dissipated, he didn't stop his guidance in time. In a panic, Ziyue hurriedly stopped the guidance diagram of the purple chi. The fire chi of the sun was slightly entrenched. Without receiving guidance, it finally dissipated gradually. Fortunately, this is my first time cultivating. The guidance of the guidance diagram is relatively weak, and the fire chi of the sun is less. Otherwise, it would really be dangerous. Ziyue's face was pale, and he was slightly relieved. He was also secretly vigilant. The pain of being burned by fire was deeply etched in his memory. It was so painful that he wanted to die, but he didn't want to experience it again. This was the winter sun due to the various obstructions of the atmosphere. The intensity of the fire chi of the sun was reduced countless times. If it was the fire chi of the summer sun, just a little bit of it into his body would probably cause him to be severely injured. It is said that the way of immortal cultivation is something that everyone yearns for. There's indeed a reason for this. Even if it was dangerous this time, the rewards were also not small. Ziyue's gaze looked at his own attribute panel, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. Name, Ziyue Strength. 1. 93. Cannot be upgraded. Speed. 1. 85. Cannot be upgraded. Vitality. 2. 0. 1. Cannot be upgraded. Mental Strength. 1. 25 can be upgraded. Martial arts. Great mastery of meditation stance cannot be upgraded. Immortal arts. Purple chi visualization technique cannot be upgraded if not initiated. Spiritual energy. 373. With just one session of cultivation, his strength, speed, and vitality had all increased by a certain margin, especially his vitality, which had now broken too. And most importantly, with this session of cultivation, his mental strength attribute had awakened, and thus it had appeared on his attribute panel. Not to mention, it was currently in a state where it could be upgraded. Chapter 22. Consume 55 points of spirit energy to increase my spiritual power. Increase. Ziyue immediately chose to increase his spiritual power. In an instant, Ziyue felt his head heating up. His spiritual will seem to have been tempered countless times in this short period of time, becoming tough and strong. When he regained his clarity, he immediately felt the difference. His perception of his surroundings seemed to have increased by a large margin. Previously, he could hear the chirping of insects and birds, but now he could suddenly discern the direction of these chirping sounds, and even had a vague guess as to how far away they were from him. This effect is indeed powerful. Unfortunately, my spiritual power has reached its limit after increasing to 1. 8. Ziyue was slightly regretful, but he also felt a wave of comfort. Originally, his body's strength had not increased for more than 10 days after the completion of his meditation stance. Now that it had increased once again, it naturally made him happy. Slightly stretching his body, Ziyue stood up. Looking at the fine dirt on his body, he hurriedly ran to a nearby mountain spring and washed himself. When he went down the mountain, Ziyue was not in a hurry, so he seemed to be more relaxed. 10 minutes later, Ziyue went down the mountain and walked into the southeast street. At this time, the sky was already bright. Ziyue finally had the heart to look at the surrounding rooms. Compared to the West Street, North Street, Southeast Street was indeed much more dilapidated. In the corners, there were even brothel-like houses. The surrounding environment was also extremely unhygienic, with all sorts of smells assaulting his nose. Not wanting to stay for too long, Ziyue was about to leave when a strange voice suddenly sounded. Mount Ziyue? Ziyue hurriedly turned around and saw a skinny woman in her 20s holding a 4 or 5-year-old girl, sizing him up. Aunt? Ziyue was puzzled, and immediately memories of this woman surfaced in his mind as he called out tentatively. The reason why he remembered was because his aunt's name was too unique, filled with the smell of dirt. Bai Erniu was Ziyue's father's biological sister, and also his only sister. It is said that she married a mason and lived in the town. I heard from your father that you came to town a few days ago. I was wondering when I should go and see you. I didn't expect to run into you at this time. Bai Erniu smiled and quickly said, Just in time, eat lunch with me. I'll buy you meat to eat. No need. I have to go back to work at noon. Ziyue shook his head. He remembered that his aunt had been good to him when he was young, and he felt a little closer to her. Suddenly, he frowned and looked at the little girl in his aunt's arms. He said, This is little sister Yume, right? She doesn't look right. As he got closer, his mental strength increased greatly, and he suddenly felt an obscure aura from her body. This aura immediately reminded him of his encounter with a ghost. She kept crying when she woke up in the morning. She must be tired now and fell asleep. I was just about to bring her to the doctor to have a look. Speaking of the daughter in her arms, Bai Erniu showed a trace of anxiety. Although she had fallen asleep, her face was still extremely pale, her brows were knitted, and her closed eyes were rolling, causing her eyelids to tremble. And you know that I met a ghost some time ago. I look at little sister's complexion. It's very similar to mine. I think she may have also encountered something unclean. Ziyue hesitated for a moment and said, No, it can't be. Bai Erniu's face was pale, and she said with a trembling voice, You'll know when you touch her back. If it's cold, then my guess is likely to be true. Then we'll have to invite someone, preferably a martial arts practitioner with vigorous chi and blood. Ziyue thought for a moment and suggested. Of course, it would be best if it was someone like the Wutong Mountain's fifth Dao master who cultivated the immortal method. Now he is actually considered one, but he hasn't learned the purple chi divine method yet. His means are really limited. When Bai Ernyo heard this, she quickly stretched out her hand to touch her daughter's back. She subconsciously shrank back and exclaimed, "It's so cold." Not only was it icy cold, when she touched it, she even felt a gloomy and cold aura spread along her arm, causing her to shiver. She suddenly panicked and said helplessly, "What should I do? Your uncle was called to work in Jyogo village yesterday. He won't be back for 10 days or half a month. I'm just a woman. How can I know a martial arts practitioner? By the way, Su Ming from the village, weren't you saved by him? Where is he? Can you take me to him?" Thinking of Su Ming, she quickly pulled Ziyue's sleeve excitedly. "Annie, don't worry. It's inconvenient to bring my younger sister along. I'll go find Uncle Ming later. Take me to your house to recognize it first. We'll come over no later than 7 to 9 o'clock. During this time, try to let little sister Yume bask in the sun more to get rid of the yin qi." Ziyue said calmly. Okay. My house is not far away. Go in from this path. The 7th house on the left is my house." Bai Ernyo said, and quickly led Ziyue in. "Aunt, I know the place. I'll go find Uncle Ming first. I'll come back in the evening. If you're really worried, you can take little sister to the medical center first." Ziyue said and did not stay any longer. He quickly left. Take care, Bai Ernyo said repeatedly. Looking at her daughter in her arms, she sighed again. After thinking about it, she still ran to the medical center. Qinghe Wharf was located at the junction of Qinghe Town's North Street and West Street. It was connected to the wharf by a tributary specially dug from the Wuhe River 10 miles away. It could be used for ships to enter Qinghe Town. This was also the reason why Qinghe Town was far more prosperous than ordinary towns and had a large population. Ziyue knew the location of Qinghe Wharf, but he had never been there. After saying goodbye to his aunt, he went straight to the wharf. Standing on the wharf, he immediately saw 7 or 8 cargo ships scattered in 2s and 3s. Some were only temporarily docked, and some were merchant ships that were about to set off. Dozens of dock workers were moving goods up and down. It was a busy scene. Bai Ziyue sized up his surroundings and saw a man in a short-sleeved shirt with a fiery red wooden token hanging on his waist. He hurriedly walked over. That fiery red wooden sign was the symbol of an official disciple of the Scorching Sun Gang. Ziyue, as an apprentice of the Scorching Sun Gang, naturally knew him. The entire wharf was the property of the Scorching Sun Gang. This official disciple of the Scorching Sun Gang was obviously a supervisor sent here by the Scorching Sun Gang. At this time, he was just standing there, but he had his own prestige. "Senior brother, I'm looking for Su Ming. May I ask where he is?" Ziyue said politely. "Senior brother, are you also a member of the Scorching Sun Gang? The clothes of the Pearl Restaurant. Are you an apprentice? How are you related to Su Ming?" The big man looked at Ziyue in surprise and asked one after another. Chapter 23. I'm Head Su's nephew. Ziyue replied straightforwardly. Since they were from the same village, it was inevitable that they would be related. Strictly speaking, they were uncle and nephew. Nephew? He was a little confused. The nephew that came last time did not look like this. However, he did not care and just said, "Head Su is not here. He went to escort a ship of goods. Will he be back?" Ziyue's heart sank. He was worried about this situation when he came. He knew that there were many bandits around Qinghe Town. The most rampant one was the Ghost Head Stronghold. They had just committed a big crime in the town some time ago. However, the most troublesome ones were actually the water bandits. The water bandits occupied an area of hundreds of miles around Wuhiyang. It was said that their strength was not weaker than the Scorching Sun Gang. If they were transporting some relatively precious goods, they would need Su Ming's personal escort. However, Uncle Ming was not here. What about his aunt? If everything goes well, he'll be back in 3 to 5 days. If he's slow, It'll take at least 10 days. The burly man said casually. It seems that we have to think of another way. On the way back, Zuf frowned. He did not know many people in Chinatown. Uncle Ming was already the strongest among them. Other than him, there was only Sun Nong and Uncle Sunday. Although he never mentioned his past, he should not be weak since he was able to escape from the Ghost Head Stronghold's bandits. However, when Zue told Sun Nong about the matter, he shook his head and said, I can't help you with this. Then, he seemed to feel that his rejection was too straightforward, so he continued, Ghosts are evil creatures, and their methods are unpredictable. No one knows whether they are strong or weak. Previously, the Tang family had to invite the 5-channel masters to resolve the problem. My strength is limited, so I really can't help you. I know I'm forcing you. Zue pursed his lips and said. In fact, he had expected this before he asked. Back then, the other party had abandoned him without hesitation and fled. Naturally, he was not a warm-hearted person. However, when the other party really refused, he still felt a little uncomfortable. How about this, Uncle Sun? Help me tell Manager Lee that I'm taking a leave of absence today and will come back tomorrow. Zue didn't say anything else. He returned to his room and walked out of the Pearl restaurant. It seems that I can only rely on myself. Bai Zue finally made up his mind when his pleas for help failed. He planned to do it himself. In fact, it was not that he had no confidence in this matter. The Purple Chi Divine Observation technique also recorded some methods to guard against and deal with ghosts. Some of them could even be used by ordinary people. Furthermore, when he had sensed the obscure aura on his cousin's body, he had vaguely sensed that the ghost's strength was not too strong with his spiritual perception that far surpassed that of ordinary people. Perhaps his intuition wasn't accurate, but he still wanted to try. Night fell unknowingly. Zue, dressed in black, carried a wooden bucket covered with a lid in his left hand and a few bamboo tubes in his right hand. He carried a half-meter-long backpack wrapped in coarse cloth on his back and stepped directly into the southeast street. Following the direction of his aunt's house in his memory, Zue quickly stepped into a small path. The 7 from the left, he knocked on the door. With a creak, the door opened. Zue's aunt, Bai Erniu, immediately stuck her head out. You're alone? Where's Su Ming? Seeing that only Zue came over, Bai Erniu's face immediately changed, and she said in a panic, Uncle Ming went to escort them. It will take 3 to 5 days to come back. Zue said without changing his expression. Then what should we do? I went to the clinic today and found that not only my Yume has been haunted by ghosts these days, but many children are also in the same situation. The doctor said there was no way, and some people have already been killed. Without Su Ming's help, my Yume. With that, Bai Erniu's tears came down. Hearing this, Zue frowned and asked, You mean there are many children who have also encountered ghosts? Yes, just a dozen meters away from my house, Old Hong's house. His child is the same age as Yume. I heard that in order to stay in the human world, the little ghost found a scapegoat. My poor Yume is only 5 years old. Bai Erniu's face was sad, and she was very frightened. She even said the ridiculous words she heard outside. Don't worry, I have a way. Seeing that his aunt was about to cry again, Bai Zue hurriedly said, You? What can you do? Bai Erniu was stunned and asked in surprise. It was not until then that she discovered that in a short time, her nephew not only grew taller, he was only a head shorter than her when he stood up. Even the look on his face was serious and serious. He was not like an ordinary child at all. I have learned something in the Scorching Sun gang for a month. I naturally have a way to deal with a little ghost. In order to comfort his aunt, Zue pretended to be relaxed and said, You really have a way? Bai Erniu was still a little skeptical. Zue was still too young to be convinced. Of course. Zue nodded, pointed to the things he brought, and said with confidence, I've prepared everything. As long as the ghost dares to come, then it can't leave. Although she was still a little hesitant, she really had no clue at this time, so she chose to believe. Zue and his aunt came to his cousin's room together. Seeing that she had fallen asleep, he directly said to Bai Erniu, Aunt, you go back to sleep first. I will stay here. Forget it, I can't sleep. After hesitating for a moment, Byerniu did not dare to say that she was also afraid and insisted on staying in the room. Hearing this, Zue did not say much. He sat directly on the chair and waited silently. In the room, the candles have already been extinguished. Zue closed his eyes to rest. Unknowingly, it was already midnight. Suddenly, Zue's eyes suddenly opened and whispered, "It's coming." Byerniu wanted to shout, but she remembered that she was facing a ghost, so she quickly covered her mouth with her hand and asked in a mosquito-like voice, "Where is it?" She opened her eyes wide, but she did not notice the ghost's figure. The only thing that made her feel a little strange was that the surroundings have obviously become a lot colder, as if there was a chill constantly attacking her, making her shiver. "Dip your eyes with grapefruit leaves." Zue took out a small bamboo tube and handed it to Byerniu. This was the cow's tears that he specially got from the slaughterhouse for this operation. In addition to the cow's tears in the wooden barrel, he also filled a pot of black dog blood, a bamboo tube of cockscomb blood, and a bamboo tube of boy urine. These are all yang things, which have a certain restraining effect on evil ghosts. Hearing this, Byerniu quickly took the bamboo tube, took out the grapefruit leaves inside, and dipped them on both of her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, she suddenly shouted, "Oh my God!" Then her eyes rolled back, her body collapsed, and she fainted. Chapter 24. In the room, a thin and beautiful female ghost of about 17 or 18 years old had appeared out of nowhere. The female ghost's hair was disheveled and her face was pale. Her hollow eyes were filled with a hint of violence. Earlier, Andy had fainted because she had suddenly seen the female ghost in the room and met her empty gaze. Zue had no time to check on his aunt's condition. The moment he saw the female ghost enter the room through the wall, he quickly got up. Perhaps his aunt's scream had attracted the ghost's attention. The moment Zue got up, he immediately realized that his surroundings had changed. He was now on a desolate slope. His surroundings were desolate. Only in the distance, there seemed to be candlelight. Ghostly labyrinth. Zue's expression did not change. He immediately recognized that this was a common technique used by ghosts, ghostly labyrinth. This technique was not very destructive, but it was good at confusing the direction. If one was not careful, they would fall into the traps set by the female ghost and be killed. From this, it could be seen that this female ghost was not simple, because ordinary ghosts could not master the ghostly labyrinth technique. Strictly speaking, this was a kind of magic. It could only be mastered after being taught. Compared to this, the little ghost that Zue had encountered back then was really very weak. Humph! Break! Faced with this situation, Zue did not panic. He snorted and opened the wooden bucket in his hand without thinking. Thick and smelly black dog's blood swayed in it. Without hesitation, the whole bucket of black dog's blood was sprinkled in front of him. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. An ear-piercing sound of corrosion was heard. The barren hill, the slope, and the houses all disappeared. At this moment, he was still standing in the room. He did not even move his feet. The ghostly labyrinth technique was broken. The female ghost flew back and left the range of the black dog's blood. She looked surprised and doubtful. The female ghost hesitated, but Zue did not hesitate. The moment he broke the ghostly labyrinth technique, his body moved quickly. He quickly opened a bamboo tube and sprinkled it behind him and the wall on the left. What was inside the bamboo tube was his virgin urine. He knew that the female ghost was not invisible and had the ability to go through walls. He wanted to prevent her from going through the wall. At this time, the female ghost seemed to have calmed down again. Suddenly, a charming smile appeared on her face. She opened her mouth slightly and called out softly, young master, come here." At this moment, in Zue's eyes, the female ghost seemed to have turned into a beautiful woman with a powerful charm. Under the effect of this charm, even an ordinary martial artist would be affected. They would involuntarily approach her and be slaughtered. Zue's willpower was strong, far surpassing that of an ordinary person. This little bit of charm was naturally unable to affect him. Not to mention, what the female ghost was using right now was a seduction technique that targeted adults with weak willpower. This kind of magic spell might be useful against them, or even some powerful outer forging powerhouses. However, he was still a child, so he wouldn't be affected. However, just as he was about to break free from the charm, he suddenly had an idea. I might as well beat her at her own game and make her stay here forever. Originally, Ziyue only planned to repel the female ghost. After all, with his current strength, the methods that he could use to deal with ghosts were limited. However, after exchanging blows with her, he had already found out about the female ghost's background. He knew that although her methods were strange, they weren't very strong. His confidence immediately increased. At this moment, Ziyue's expression froze. A trace of confusion appeared in his eyes. He staggered and involuntarily approached her. "Haha, come here, come play." The female ghost laughed coquettishly and continued to release her charm. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. As he approached, Ziyue also felt that the charm was gradually becoming stronger. However, this strength didn't affect him much. He looked confused, but his mind was clear. Come, come." The female ghost smiled and slowly stretched out her hand. Her hand looked white and tender, but it was actually bloodless. When she stretched out her hand, her fingernails suddenly grew crazily. In the blink of an eye, her 10 fingernails became a foot long. An eerie, ghostly aura was revealed along with her fingernails, causing one's heart to turn cold. Another magic spell, and it's a rare offensive magic spell. The vigilance in Ziyue's heart increased greatly. His originally confused expression suddenly became clear. Without saying a word, the bamboo tube in his hand spilled out with incomparable speed. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Ah! The female ghost screamed as the boy's urine landed on her body, corroding her soul and creating holes in it. It was as if acid had broken through her skin. Her originally beautiful face was now riddled with holes, making her extremely ugly. Die! Ziyue's eyes were cold. He reached behind him and immediately pulled out a rusty butcher's knife from the cloth bag and appeared in his hand. This butcher's knife was also found by Ziyue in the slaughterhouse. Don't be fooled by the fact that it was covered in rust. Even the edge of the blade was a little twisted, but this blade had killed countless lives. It was a genuine evil weapon. Its lethality towards ghosts was far greater than some of the sharp blades forged from fine iron. Ziyue's knife was ruthless and indomitable. He didn't know any knife skills, nor did he learn any martial arts. However, his powerful strength and physique that was twice that of an ordinary person made this knife extremely fast and fierce. Chi! The female ghost screamed and raised her ghostly claws to block, but the knife directly cut them in half. Her fingernails, which were condensed with powerful soul power, broke one by one. The powerful evil aura even made her soul unstable. Ziyue didn't show any mercy. After one knife, another knife swept out. The force in his body couldn't help but burst out. Puff! The result of this knife was outstanding. From top to bottom, the female ghost was directly cut in half. However, even so, the female ghost didn't die. In the blink of an eye, she reformed. However, looking at her now, her soul was clearly many times weaker than before. Even her body seemed a little faint, as if it could dissipate at any time. At this moment, the female ghost was really scared. Without thinking, she immediately rushed towards the wall, wanting to go through the wall and escape. However, just as she was about to reach the wall, a weak extreme yang aura spread out from it and directly interrupted her charge. There were wet spots on the wall. It was the urine of the boy that Ziyue had spilled on the wall earlier. If she hadn't been injured before, she could have used her powerful soul to force her way out. However, at this moment, her soul was weak and could dissipate at any time. Just a little bit of extreme yang aura was enough to make her afraid. Young master. The female ghost panicked and wanted to beg for mercy. Her face revealed a coquettish expression, but she wanted to use the art of charm again to confuse Ziyue. Chapter 25. What she didn't know was that because she washed her face with the boy's urine, her face was already riddled with holes and was extremely ugly. Her current expression only made Ziyue feel disgusted. There was nothing pleasing about it all. Therefore, Ziyue's face twitched slightly. Anger surged up, and he slashed down even more decisively. The female ghost's expression changed. Her eyes were fierce and resentful. She hurriedly threw out a small round jade. This round jade seemed to contain a special power. When Ziyue's pig-slaughtering knife slashed on it, it actually made a clanking sound and was stopped. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the female ghost's body was like a shadow. She once again gathered a dense ghost aura and revealed her ghost claws, grabbing at him. Ziyue exhaled lightly. His face was tense. The aura on his body suddenly bloomed. Zen stance perfect. Under the influence of the blood in his body, his strength surged. Layer by layer, from bottom to top, it all gathered together. He punched out. The strength spurted out. It was swift and powerful. His blood and chi poured and directly tore the ghost claws apart. It crashed into her body and instantly tore her soul into pieces. Ah! A mournful wail of the ghost was heard. The female ghost completely dissipated. Finally, she couldn't condense again. Dead? Ziyue glanced at his status panel. Name: Ziyue Strength 1. 93. Cannot be upgraded. Speed 1. 85. Cannot be upgraded. Physique 2. 01. Cannot be upgraded. Spirit 1. 8. Cannot be upgraded. Martial Arts. Perfect Zen Stance. Cannot be upgraded. Celestial Arts. Purple Chi Divine Observation Technique. Cannot be upgraded. Spirit Energy. 507. Seeing that his spirit energy had indeed increased, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. If his spirit energy increased, it naturally meant that this ghost was completely dead. Her soul had scattered, and there was no possibility of her turning the tables. After increasing my spirit attribute this morning, my spirit energy was originally 318 points. Now it shows 507 points. This means that this female ghost has provided me with 189 points of spirit energy. This also means that this female ghost's strength is more than 10 times stronger than the little ghost I met before. She's also stronger than the ghost head stronghold bandit that was casually killed by the second son of the Li family, Li Su. Ziyue secretly compared them and had some ideas in his mind. After experiencing the increase of soul energy many times, he could naturally determine that the amount of soul energy was related to the strength of the deceased. Of course, to be more precise, Ziyue guessed that it was related to the strength of the soul of the deceased. However, in his understanding, the strength of the soul was often linked to the strength of the deceased. Therefore, it was reasonable for him to judge his strength based on this. The amount of spiritual energy provided by the female ghost was much more than the ghost head stronghold bandits who were chasing after him. Naturally, she was much stronger. If it's just those 3 spells, even an ordinary martial artist with external training would probably be at a disadvantage. This time, if he hadn't made sufficient preparations, the outcome would have been different. At the very least, it wouldn't go so smoothly. However, at the same time, this attack also let him know that he wasn't completely helpless against ghosts. With his chi and blood that were far more vigorous than the average adult, he could already cause a certain amount of damage to them. Then, Ziyue's gaze landed on the ground. A round jade the size of a child's palm was lying there quietly. Previously, the female ghost had relied on this round jade to block his sure kill slash. He knew that his strength was great, and the pig-slaughtering knife had a certain restraining effect on the female ghost. However, he could rely on this round jade to block it. It was obvious that there was a certain magical aspect to it. However, looking at the round jade, Ziyue didn't dare to let down his guard. It was inevitable that the items on ghosts would carry some filthy aura. If an ordinary person was contaminated, they could fall seriously ill. However, it was obvious that he couldn't leave the round jade in his aunt's house. Therefore, Zeus squatted down and carefully wrapped the round jade with a piece of his sleeve before picking it up. Picking up the round jade, Zeus found that it was indeed somewhat different. Not only was it crystal clear, but he could also feel a trace of warmth through his sleeve. There was also a pair of mandarin ducks carved on it, looking extremely delicate. It was definitely a good piece of jade. Even if he took it to the pawn shop, he could exchange it for a considerable amount of money. However, what really surprised him was that before he used all his strength to cut it with his knife, but it didn't leave a scar on it. It was really strange. After thinking about it, Zeus put away this piece of jade for the time being. This round jade was strange. There was definitely a secret. At this time, it was staying in his aunt's house. He couldn't investigate it. After putting it away, he moved to his aunt's side and woke her up. As for his cousin Yume, she was sleeping soundly from the beginning to the end. I am ghost. Where is the ghost? Bayernio just woke up and suddenly remembered the ghost shadow she saw before. Her face changed greatly. She quickly looked around. In fact, her eyes were narrowed. Once she saw it, she immediately closed her eyes and pretended not to see it. Zeus saw a little funny, but he still opened his mouth and said, "The ghost has been driven away by me. It shouldn't come back in the future." He didn't say the fact that the ghost had been killed by him. There was no need to. Even if he said it, his aunt might not believe him. So he simply changed his words. Really? What if the ghost comes back in the future? Bayernio was still a little worried. After some thought, Zeus said, "How about this? This is a jar of cockscomb blood that I specially collected. Sprinkle some on the cracks of the door, the corners of the walls, and the roof. That way, ghosts won't dare to come in. If you're still afraid, raise a few roosters. Roosters are young. They also have a certain restraining effect on the ghost." This cockscomb blood was also collected by him. In fact, most of his money was spent on it. He originally planned to use it to deal with the ghost, but in a hurry, he didn't have time to use it. At this time, it was still intact in a bamboo tube. Okay, I will do it." Bayernio nodded again and again. This time, she was really scared. Next, Zeus was arranged to stay in the guest room. His aunt and cousin slept together. Lying on the bed, Zeus didn't have the initial excitement of killing the ghost. Instead, he was a little worried. From his aunt's words, Zeus already knew that this time, his cousin's encounter with the ghost was not an exception. There were many children around who had the same experience. In addition, the strength and means of the female ghost that Zeus killed were far from comparable to ordinary ghosts. Therefore, Zeus judged. Someone is raising ghosts. Zeus frowned deeply. He had a hunch that his guess was likely to be true. Because ordinary ghosts, even if they had resentment, would first look for the person who hurt them. It was impossible for them to attack a group of children with weak and pure yang qi on such a large scale. Only if they were driven by someone would they absorb yang qi to strengthen their soul and strengthen themselves. Ghost raising technique, evil cultivator. Zeus' face was slightly ugly. He knew that he might be in trouble. However, even if he knew this, he would still do it without hesitation. After all, people have feelings. It was related to his relatives. He couldn't just leave them alone. Chapter 26. On Heavy Inkstone Mountain by Zeus stopped cultivating and slowly opened his eyes. In the distance, the sun had just risen. The morning sun of early winter was not glaring. After the previous lesson, Zeus naturally did not dare to visualize the purple chi guidance diagram for a long time. Every time, he would stop cultivating when the sun was about to completely rise and the purple chi was about to dissipate. It's a pity that the purple chi of the morning sun was born for too short a time. Zeus sighed regretfully as he sensed the state of his cultivation. Apart from the time he cultivated, the weather had the greatest impact on him. Now, almost 20 days had passed since he killed the ghost, and he had only cultivated in this grave, Inkstone Mountain a total of 5 times. In between, he had experienced more than 10 days of cloudy and rainy weather. He could not see the sun at all, which greatly affected his cultivation progress. Perhaps because of the intervention of the authorities, the evil cultivators that he had been rather worried about did not appear in the past 20 days, which made him feel very relieved. Although he had also embarked on the path of immortal cultivation, his understanding of cultivators of the same kind was actually very limited. In particular, he was very envious of those mysterious and unfathomable Dharma spells. At the same time, he was also very fearful. The purple chi visualization technique was a pure cultivation technique and did not have any Dharma spells. As for the 100 Talisman catalog, the threshold of cultivation was so high that he could only look at it in the dust. Talisman brush, talisman paper, and talisman ink. Just these 3 items were enough to make him stop in his tracks. Fortunately, I already have a certain understanding of the external forging technique. Ziyue naturally did not idle during the 20 days. The restaurant was really an excellent place to inquire about information. He did not deliberately inquire about it, but he had already obtained some information about the external forging technique. Even if the external forging technique was not like the Diamond Lock Jade Art, Iron Mantle, or 6-7 unhindered technique, which could be cultivated to the peak of external forging, it was still not enough. Ziyue did not stay in the grave Inkstone Mountain for long. He slowly walked down the stone steps on the mountain. On the way, they met an old householder in a long gown. Ziyue nodded slightly and walked past him. Ziyue met this lay Buddhist when he went up the mountain for the 3rd time. However, they didn't talk at all. Later on, Ziyue inquired from his aunt that this lay Buddhist was a defenseless old scholar who failed to pass the Shiozai examination after 20 years. In order to make a living, he became a lay Buddhist. He usually lived at the foot of the mountain. Only occasionally would he go up the mountain to clean up the earth temple. After coming down from the mountain, Ziyue turned into Southeast Street with ease. It was still early in the morning, but many shops had already opened on the Southeast Street. Chaotic water, steamed dumplings, cheap but enough to sustain a family. Thinking that the restaurant had just given him a month's allowance, Ziyue could not help but go forward and buy 2 big meat buns from the steamed bun shop. As soon as he swallowed it, Bai Ziyue saw his aunt standing at the door of her house, looking around. When she saw Bai Ziyue, she hurried forward and said, "The weather is fine today. I knew you would definitely come up the mountain." "Sure enough, you came." "Aunt, what's the matter?" Ziyue's heart tightened and asked. Bai Erniu seemed to be a little nervous. She pulled Ziyue into the small path and quickly entered his courtyard. She whispered, "Didn't you ask me to pay attention to who inquired about the haunting last time?" Originally, after the government asked, no one asked about it for some time. But yesterday, 2 people came to the door and asked about the haunting in detail. Since the last incident, Bai Erniu no longer treated Ziyue as a child. She was quite concerned about his words. The next day, she bought a big rooster and more than 20 chicks. They were both male and female chicks. At this time, they were all raised in the courtyard. As for the other things he told her, she naturally kept them in mind. Ziyue followed her into the courtyard. There was a chick passing by his feet, but he did not care about this at all. With a serious face, he said, "What else did they ask?" Originally, it's not strange to ask about the ghost encounter. Every 3 to 5 days, someone will always think of asking this. But their main question was whether or not I had hired someone to catch the ghost. Seeing Ziyue's nervous face, Bai Erniu quickly said, "I naturally know that this kind of thing can't be said, so I didn't say anything about you." Then when I asked, they said that they also encountered a ghost and needed to ask someone to catch the ghost. I don't believe them. These 2 little ruffians think that I don't know them because they are a little far from here. If they really encountered a ghost, I can only say that they deserved it. Ziyue touched his nose and warned her again. "About me, you must not leak it. Don't tell anyone who comes to inquire about it." "Don't worry, I know." Bai Erniu nodded with a serious face. She was not stupid. Although she did not have much education, she also knew that the ghost last time may be a bit complicated. Besides, encountering a ghost is not fun. She naturally can't let her nephew take the risk again. After bidding farewell to his aunt, Ziyue's somewhat relaxed expression because of the discovery of the external forging method suddenly disappeared without a trace. It seems that the evil cultivator finally began to act after seeing that the government's news has passed. Ziyue's sense of crisis increased greatly. Although his aunt has helped him to evade the investigation, who knows when the other party will find out about him? I must increase my strength as soon as possible. Ziyue quickly made a decision. Due to the weather, the progress of the purple chi godly observation technique was very slow. He had not yet mastered it. Moreover, even if he mastered it, the purple chi godly observation technique was only an immortal cultivation technique. It did not have the technique to use it. In other words, it was just a spell. It could not effectively increase his strength. Therefore, he first eliminated this possibility. As for the external forging method, although he had a certain idea, he still needed some time to truly obtain it. Therefore, he set his sights on Sun Nong's Uncle Sunday. When the Li family incident broke out, Uncle Sun had said that as long as he could cultivate the Zen stance to a small success, he would teach him a set of saber techniques. At that time, because he did not want to appear too special, he could only suppress his excitement and did not reveal that he had already cultivated the Zen stance to a small success. Now, more than 40 days had passed since then. It was time for him to reveal the fact that he had achieved a small success in the Zen stance. In the Qinghe Town branch of the Scorching Sun Gang, it said that the fastest person to master the Zen stance was a disciple named Zhao Gongyi. It took him 3 days. On the other hand, it took him 50 days to cultivate the Zen stance to a small success. Although it's a little high profile for me to reach a small success in 40 days, it's not unacceptable. Ziyue calculated in his heart. He also felt that it was not necessarily a bad thing to show some talent sometimes. In Qinghe Town, perhaps it was a genius to cultivate the Zen stance to a small success in 40 days. However, if it was in Wujiang County or even a larger county, this speed was nothing. Chapter 27. You said that you've reached the initial level of the meditation stance. In the backyard of the Pearl restaurant, Sun Nong looked at Ziyue in surprise. That's right. Ziyue nodded calmly and said, Uncle Sun promised me that if I reached the initial level of the meditation stance, he would teach me a set of saber techniques. Now, I've reached the initial level. As he spoke, Ziyue did not hesitate and stood up in the meditation stance in front of Sun Nong. His feet did not move, but his body moved up and down like a galloping horse. Occasionally, he would twist and turn like a snake. As the blood in his body flowed rapidly, a visible mist rose from his body in this cold, early winter. Moving from the fixed stance to the living stance was the sign of the initial level of the meditation stance. Having reached the perfection level of the meditation stance, it was really easy for him to control his body and show the initial level of the meditation stance. I remember that it hasn't been long since you reached the initial level of the meditation stance. 40 days? As Sun Nong spoke, his expression changed. He said in disbelief, Is it really only 40 days? Ziyue stopped standing and did not speak. In the entire Qinghe Town branch, the fastest person to reach the initial level of the meditation stance only took 50 days. Only in Wujiang County did a genius reach the initial level of the meditation stance in 40 days. It seems that you're also a genius like that. No, you're more of a genius than those people. Because you have to work, you have less time to cultivate than them. As he spoke, Sun Nong's expression changed. He boasted that he had seen a lot, but he did not expect to meet such a martial arts genius in this small Pearl restaurant. Taking a deep breath, Sun Nong suddenly felt that this might be an opportunity for him. I will teach you the saber techniques. I can teach you now, but later, you have to come with me to see someone. Sun Nong said with a smile. See who? Ziyue asked. Old Mr. Ho. Sun Nong timely showed a respectful expression and said, Actually, even if you don't say it, I can guess that you must have offended someone. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been made an apprentice the moment he entered the sect. At this time, they needed the help of someone of Old Master Ho's status. With his guarantee, you will definitely be promoted to an inner court apprentice. At that time, you might not be interested in the saber technique I taught you. I've always remembered Uncle Sun's help. I'm very grateful. Ziyue's heart was faintly stirred as he spoke in a timely manner. Inner court apprentice. Naturally, he wanted to become an inner disciple, because it represented opportunities, resources, and martial arts. There were many martial techniques that he couldn't learn now, but as long as he applied, he would be able to learn them. The resources that he couldn't enjoy would also be given to him. As usual, little you, I know that you've always been a person who knows how to repay kindness. With your words, I'm relieved. Sun Nong seemed to be satisfied with Ziyue's words. Finally, he changed his tone and said, "Next, I'll teach you this saber technique, 18 consecutive saber techniques." 18 consecutive saber techniques is a saber technique known for its speed. One saber move after another. It can be said to be continuous without any break. The moves of the saber technique are not complicated. The real complicated part is the use of force in your arms. Next, I'll teach you the moves of the saber technique. Once you're familiar with the moves, you can learn how to use the force faster. When it came to martial arts, Sun Nong's face showed a rare, serious expression. He didn't carry a long saber with him, only a kitchen knife. At this time, he was holding the kitchen knife and directly practicing the saber technique. As if he was afraid that Ziyue wouldn't be able to learn it, he practiced each move very slowly. Ziyue had a good memory to begin with. Ever since he had awakened the spirit attribute and pushed it to the limit, his memory had become even more amazing. With just one demonstration, he learned most of the moves of the 18 consecutive saber techniques. By the time Sun Nong finished demonstrating it for the second time, he had completely memorized it without any mistakes. Well then, you've demonstrated once. Seeing the eager look on Ziyue's face, Sun Nong took the opportunity to say. Ziyue nodded and pulled out a pig slaughtering knife. This pig slaughtering knife was used to kill the ghost last time. This time, he was going to learn saber techniques from Sun Nong, so naturally, he brought it with him. Stood in the backyard, the tip of the knife slanted slightly, and then quickly slashed out. Then, the light of the knife bent, withdrew, rose, and slashed down again. After the first slash, there was another slash. The speed was not fast, but it gave people a feeling that there was no break. Soon, the 18 consecutive saber techniques were all performed by Ziyue. Each move was not much different from what Sun Nong demonstrated. However, Ziyue could feel that perhaps he didn't know how to use the force. Although he performed this saber technique, the power was actually very limited, and it was not as good as a slash with his full strength. Good, not bad, but there are some forces that still need to be controlled. The last slash was a little too light. Sun Nong's face twitched slightly. Ziyue had learned the moves of the 18 consecutive saber techniques after only seeing it twice, which really shocked him. He could only pick out a problem with it. Ziyue nodded and recorded it with a serious face. Then, Sun Nong let Ziyue practice it a few more times. Seeing that there was no problem with it, he began to teach him the method of using the 18 consecutive saber techniques. Any martial arts technique that only has the moves and no method of using the force is all empty moves and has no power. Only by using the force can it be able to split mountains and split rocks and slash diamonds. Although the 18 consecutive saber techniques are not the best martial arts technique, it has its own uniqueness. It is not difficult to learn the basics of saber techniques. The 18 consecutive saber techniques, one move for each move, and there is no mistake in the method of using the force. Generally, as long as you practice diligently for 2 or 3 months, you can do it. However, it is much more difficult to practice to small success. Some people practice for 3 to 5 years and may not be able to reach this level. The small success of the 18 consecutive saber techniques requires that in an instant, the 18 consecutive saber techniques become 6 consecutive saber techniques in the blink of an eye. The power of the 18 consecutive saber techniques can be doubled out of thin air. As for large success, It is to turn the 6 consecutive saber techniques into single saber techniques. Looking at it with the naked eye, only 3 saber techniques can be used. It can directly explode with twice the power. As Sun Nong spoke, he directly took the kitchen knife and began to practice the saber technique. Around his body, the saber light was crisscrossing. In a trance, the 3 sabers merged into one saber, and with one slash, a half-meter-tall bluestone in the backyard was directly cut in half by him. Ziyue went closer to take a look. The cut surface was bright and clean, and incomparably smooth. 18 consecutive saber techniques, small success. Ziyue timely revealed a look of admiration. That's right. I only got this saber technique 2 years ago, and I have already practiced it to small success. As Sun Nong spoke, he revealed a trace of pride. But soon, a trace of haze appeared in his eyes. If he had this saber technique back then, perhaps his leg would not have been seriously injured. However, there were no ifs in this world. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.